I straightened the stack of bills on my kitchen counter and sighed, glancing anxiously at my watch. Melissa was already 15 minutes late, which was actually early by her standards. Just as I reached for my phone to check if she'd texted, the doorbell chimed. I took a deep breath, plastered on my best fake smile, and swung open the door. "Jen, thank goodness you're home!" Melissa Campbell burst into my foyer, designer handbag swinging wildly from her arm, her perfume hitting me seconds before she did. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. You will not believe the absolute disaster I'm dealing with. I closed the door behind her, already feeling the familiar headache starting to form. "What's going on, Melissa?" She collapsed dramatically onto my couch, as if her legs could no longer support the weight of her problems. "It's the credit card company. They're threatening to cut me off completely. I just need a small loan to get them off my back. You know I'm good for it." I perched on the edge of the armchair across from her, choosing my words carefully. "Melissa, we talked about this last month, and the month before that. Ryan and I can't keep covering for you." "But we're family," she protested, eyes widening in practiced distress. What kind of sister-in-law refuses to help family? Before I could respond, my cell phone rang. I glanced at the caller ID and felt a wave of relief wash over me. "I'm sorry, but I need to take this. It's my father." Stepping into the kitchen, I answered quickly. "Hey, Dad. Perfect timing. What's up?" "Jennifer." The seriousness in his voice made me freeze. Dad almost never called me by my full name unless something was wrong. "I need you to come over to the house. Today, if possible." A chill ran down my spine. "Is everything okay?" "Just come as soon as you can, sweetheart," he said, then hung up without explaining further. I returned to the living room where Melissa was typing furiously on her phone. "I'm sorry, but I have to go. My father needs me." Melissa's head snapped up. "But we haven't resolved my situation. What am I supposed to tell the bank?" "We'll talk later," I said firmly, already reaching for my purse and keys. "I really have to go now." As I drove the familiar route to Dad's house in the older, more established part of Riverdale, my mind raced. Dad had always been the picture of health, stubborn, independent, and more active at 68 than most people in their 40s. But lately, he'd seemed tired. I'd suggested he see Dr. Martinez about his persistent cough, but he'd brushed it off as nothing. I pulled into the circular driveway of the home I grew up in, noticing how the autumn leaves had piled up against the garage door. That wasn't like Dad at all. He was religious about yard maintenance. "Dad?" I called out, letting myself in with my key. The house felt unusually quiet. "In my study, Jen." His voice sounded strained. I found him sitting behind his massive oak desk, the one that had intimidated me as a child. The afternoon light filtering through the windows caught the silver in his hair, making him look older than I'd ever seen him. "What's going on, Dad? You're scaring me." He gestured to the leather chair opposite him. "Sit down, sweetheart. I'm afraid I have some difficult news." My heart dropped as he continued. "I've been to see Dr. Martinez, and then a specialist, at Riverdale Memorial." He paused, meeting my eyes directly. "I have pancreatic cancer, Jen, and it's advanced." The room seemed to tilt on its axis. "No," I whispered. "There must be some mistake. We can get another opinion, try different treatments." Dad reached across the desk and took my hand in his grip still strong despite everything. "I've already done all that. The prognosis is clear. 6 months, maybe less." Tears blurred my vision as the reality of his words sank in. "Dad, no." "That's not why I asked you to come over today," he continued gently but firmly. "I need to get my affairs in order, and there are things you need to know." He pulled out a thick leather portfolio from his desk drawer. I've made some investments over the years. Properties, stocks, some business ventures. I want to make sure you're taken care of after I'm gone. Dad, stop, I pleaded. I don't want to talk about this. We have to, Jen. You need to be prepared. As he started explaining about various accounts and properties, my phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. Where are you? Melissa says you left her hanging. What happened? I ignored it, trying to focus on my father's words, but my mind was reeling. How was this happening? And how was I going to tell Ryan? Dad must have noticed my distraction. We can go over the details later, he said gently. For now, just know that everything's taken care of. You won't have to worry. I nodded numbly, still struggling to process it all. As I stood to leave, Dad pulled me into a tight hug. We'll get through this, sweetheart, he murmured. Together. I clung to him, wishing I could freeze this moment and make time stand still. But as I pulled away, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. Driving home, I felt like I was in a fog. How could I face Ryan and Melissa with this news? How could I face anyone? As I pulled into my driveway, I saw Melissa's car still parked, out front. My heart sank. I wasn't ready for this, wasn't ready for any of it. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out of the car and walked toward the house, bracing myself for whatever came next. The day of Dad's funeral dawned gray and somber, a perfect match for my mood. I stood in front of the bedroom mirror, adjusting my black dress, when Ryan appeared behind me, already dressed in his dark suit. You ready? He asked, placing his hands on my shoulders. Our eyes met in the reflection, and for a moment, I thought, I saw something unfamiliar flicker across his face. I nodded, not trusting my voice. The past 3 months had been a blur of hospital visits, hospice care, and finally, the quiet night when Dad slipped away while I held his hand. Through it all, Ryan had been present, but somehow distant. I'd been too consumed by grief to really examine why. As we drove to the church, rain began to fall, gentle at first, then harder, drumming against the roof of the car. I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change, and not just because of Dad's passing. The service was a blur of faces and whispered condolences. I barely registered the words of the eulogy, focusing instead on the framed photo of Dad next to the casket. He looked so vibrant, his smile reaching his eyes, his silver hair neatly combed. How could he be gone? As we gathered at the cemetery, Melissa sidled up to me, dressed in an expensive black outfit that somehow managed to look both appropriate and showy at the same time. Jen, I'm so sorry for your loss, she said, her voice dripping with sympathy. Your father was such a wonderful man. I'm sure he made sure you'd be well taken care of. I stiffened, shocked by her brazenness. Before I could respond, Ryan appeared at my side, guiding me away. Not now, he muttered, shooting his sister a warning look. Back at the house, well-meaning friends and family filled every room, bringing casseroles and sharing stories about Dad. I felt suffocated by their presence, their sympathy. I retreated to Dad's study, needing a moment alone. I ran my fingers over his desk, remembering our last real conversation there. The folder he'd shown me was still in the drawer, along with several other documents he'd mentioned. I needed to go through them, but not today. Today was for remembering, for grieving. A knock at the door startled me. It was Eleanor Phillips, Dad's lawyer, a tall woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. Jennifer, I'm sorry to disturb you, but there are some matters we need to discuss, she said gently. I nodded, gesturing for her to sit. What is it? She pulled out a thick envelope. Your father's will. He was very specific about his wishes. As Ms. Phillips began reading, I felt a mix of emotions wash over me. Dad had left me everything. The house, his savings, his business interests, even several investment properties I hadn't known he owned. "There's one more thing," Ms. Phillips said, handing me a sealed envelope. "Your father wanted you to have this privately." I took it with trembling hands, recognizing Dad's handwriting immediately. Before I could open it, the door burst open. Ryan and Melissa stood there, faces expectant. "What's going on?" Ryan demanded, his eyes darting between me and the lawyer. Ms. Phillips stood gathering her papers. "I was just going over William's will with Jennifer, if you'll excuse us." "No," Melissa interrupted, stepping into the room. "We're family. We should hear this too." I felt a surge of anger rise up in me. "This is private, Melissa. Please leave." Ryan moved closer, his expression hardening slightly. "Jen, don't you think we should discuss this as a family? After all, what affects you affects me too." I stared at him, suddenly seeing something in his eyes I hadn't noticed before. Calculation. "What exactly are you implying, Ryan?" "We're just concerned," Melissa chimed in. "You've been through so much, Jen. You shouldn't have to deal with all this alone." "I agree," Ryan added too quickly. "Let me help you with the paperwork, the decisions. It's a lot for one person to handle." I stood up, clutching Dad's letter to my chest. "I appreciate your concern, but I'm perfectly capable of handling my father's affairs." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need some time to myself." I brushed past them, ignoring their protests, and locked myself in the guest bathroom. With shaking hands, I tore open Dad's letter. "My dearest Jennifer, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I hope you know how much I love you and how proud I am of the woman you've become. You have your mother's strength and my stubbornness, a powerful combination. I've made arrangements to protect you and your inheritance. Trust your instincts, sweetheart. I've watched with growing concern how Ryan and Melissa interact with you, how they view what's mine, and soon to be yours. Not everyone has your best interests at heart, even those who claim to love you. In the bottom drawer of my desk, behind the false panel, press the right corner twice, you'll find documentation of some concerning financial irregularities involving Ryan's business. I hired a private investigator when I became suspicious of his sudden interest in my investments. What he found troubled me deeply. Stay vigilant. Seek out Sophia if you need support. She's always had your back. And remember, you're stronger than you know. All my love, Dad. I read the letter twice, my hands shaking harder with each word. A strange calm settled over me as pieces began to fall into place. Ryan's increasing business trips, his sudden interest in Dad's financial affairs, Melissa's escalating money problems. Carefully folding the letter, I tucked it into my bra, the one place I knew Ryan wouldn't look. I splashed cold water on my face, took a deep breath, and opened the door. The battle for my father's legacy had just begun, and I needed to be ready. The next morning, I woke to an empty bed. Ryan had already left, a hastily scribbled note on his pillow. "Early meeting with Trevor. Don't wait up tonight." These early meetings had become more frequent lately, I realized. How had I not noticed the pattern before? I called Sophia, my oldest friend, who'd flown in for the funeral and was staying at a nearby hotel. "Can we meet for coffee?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "Just us?" An hour later, we were tucked into a corner booth at Riverdale Roasters, far from prying ears. "Okay, spill it," Sophia said, stirring her latte. "You've got that." "Look." I hesitated, then pushed Dad's letter across the table. "Read this." Her eyes widened as she scanned the contents. "Oh my God, Jen. Do you think it's true?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But things haven't been adding up lately. Ryan's been distant, secretive about work, and Melissa keeps asking for money, more than usual." "Have you checked the desk drawer?" "Yet?" The one with the false panel? I shook my head. Ryan's barely left my side since the funeral. But he's going out of town this weekend. Some business trip with Trevor. I made air quotes around business trip. Sophia leaned forward, her expression serious. Then that's when we move. Saturday, you and me, we'll go through everything. For the first time since Dad died, I felt a glimmer of hope. Thank you, Soph. That's what friends are for, she said, squeezing my hand. Now act normal until then. Don't let them suspect anything. Playing normal proved harder than I expected. Ryan became unusually attentive, bringing home flowers, suggesting we go out to dinner. It felt calculated, as if he was buttering me up for something. I've been thinking, he said over pasta at our favorite Italian restaurant Friday night. Maybe we should consider investing some of your inheritance. I know a few opportunities that could really pay off. I twirled spaghetti around my fork, buying time. It's a bit soon, don't you think? Dad's only been gone a week. Ryan reached across the table, taking my hand. I just want to make sure we're making smart decisions, Jen. That money could secure our future. Our future, I repeated, noticing his choice of words. I thought Dad's will was pretty clear that the inheritance was mine. A flicker of something, annoyance, crossed his face before he smiled again. Of course it is, honey. I just meant that as your husband, I want what's best for you. For us. I matched his smile with one of my own. I know. Let me think about it, okay? I'm still processing everything. Later that night, as Ryan packed for his business trip, I noticed him taking dress clothes that seemed more appropriate for a nice dinner than business meetings. Where did you say you were going again? I asked casually. Just upstate, he replied vaguely. Potential investor meetings with Trevor. The next morning, after seeing Ryan off, I called Sophia immediately. He's gone. Let's do this. We met at Dad's house an hour later. I led Sophia to the study, my heart pounding, as I approached the desk. Bottom drawer, false panel, press the right corner twice, I murmured, following Dad's instructions. There was a soft click, and the back of the drawer slid open, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside lay a USB drive and a folder labeled Confidential. RC Investigation. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were photographs of Ryan meeting with people I didn't recognize in restaurants, hotels, parking lots. Financial statements showing large transfers from his business account to offshore accounts. And most damning of all, a document that appeared to be a draft agreement between Ryan and a developer to sell off Dad's most valuable property, a waterfront lot he'd been saving to build his retirement dream home. The property isn't even his. To sell, I whispered, shock giving way to anger. He was planning this before Dad even died. Sophia pointed to a sticky note attached to one of the photos. Look at the date. This was taken 3 months ago, right around when your dad got his diagnosis. And look who he's with, I said, my voice hardening as I recognized Melissa in one of the photos, sitting close to a man I didn't know. They've been working together all along. We spent hours going through everything, copying files, taking photos of documents. By the time we finished, a clear picture had emerged. Ryan and Melissa had been plotting for months, possibly years, to get control of Dad's assets. The most disturbing discovery was a document outlining a plan to have me declared mentally unfit due to extreme grief and emotional instability if I refused to cooperate. They can't possibly think this would work, Sophia said, but her voice lacked conviction. They might if they get the right doctor to back them up. I remembered Ryan's sudden insistence that I see his friend Dr. Wallace for grief counseling. It all made sickening sense now. As we were putting everything back, my phone rang. It was Melissa. Jen, where are you? Ryan said you'd be home all day. I stopped by with some food, but you weren't there. I caught Sophia's eye, and she nodded encouragingly. I needed some time alone. So I came to Dad's house, I said, amazed at how steady my voice sounded. Just going through some old photos. Oh, she sounded disappointed. Well, don't spend too much time dwelling on the past. It's not healthy. Why don't we meet for brunch tomorrow? There are some things I think we should discuss. What things? I asked, deliberately playing dumb. You know, Dad's house, his accounts. Ryan mentioned you're having trouble deciding what to do with everything. I gritted my teeth. Actually, I've been giving it a lot of thought, but sure. Let's meet tomorrow. Say noon at the Garden Cafe? Perfect. See you then. She hung up, sounding far too pleased. Sophia raised an taguai's eyebrow. You're not really meeting her, are you? Oh, I am, I said, a plan already forming in my mind. But first, we need to make a stop at Riverdale First National. Dad mentioned a safety deposit box in his letter, and I think I know which key opens it. The next morning, armed with new knowledge and the contents of Dad's safety deposit box, which included, among other things, a second letter outlining his suspicions and his wishes for his estate, I met Melissa at the Garden Cafe. She was all ready, there, sipping a mimosa, looking perfectly put together as always. She waved enthusiastically when she saw me. Jen, over here. I've already ordered us drinks. I slid into the seat across from her, declining the offered mimosa. I'd prefer to keep a clear head today. Her smile faltered slightly. Suit yourself. So, how are you holding up? Better, actually. I'm starting to see things more clearly. That's wonderful, she exclaimed, clasping her hands together. That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about. Ryan and I have been so worried about you making decisions while you're vulnerable. I raised an eyebrow. Vulnerable? Grief can make people do irrational things, she explained, as if talking to a child. Make poor financial decisions. Ryan thinks, and I agree, that it might be better if he handled your inheritance for a while, just until you're in a better headspace. I took a sip of water, considering my next words carefully. That's quite a coincidence because I've been thinking about the inheritance too, about how interested you and Ryan have suddenly become in my finances. Melissa's smile became fixed. We're family, Jen. Of course we're interested in your well-being. My well-being or my bank account? I pulled out one of the photos from Dad's file, the one showing her and Ryan meeting with a real estate developer. Care to explain this? The color drained from her face. Where did you get that? From Dad. He knew what you and Ryan were planning. He knew Melissa. She recovered quickly, her expression hardening. You don't understand what you're talking about. Ryan and I were trying to help your father streamline his investments. By selling off his properties without his knowledge? By planning to declare me mentally incompetent if I didn't cooperate? I pulled out more documents, laying them on the table one by one. It's all here, Melissa. Every meeting, every plan, every betrayal. Her eyes darted around the cafe, then back to me. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. What do you want? I want you and Ryan to back off completely. No more talk about managing my inheritance. No more concerns about my mental health. She leaned forward, desperation clear in her eyes. You don't understand, Jen. I'm in trouble, serious trouble. I owe people money, dangerous people, and Ryan's business is failing. We needed this. So that makes it okay to conspire against me? To plot behind my back? I gathered the documents, tucking them back into my bag. I have copies of everything, by the way, and Dad's lawyer has been informed. You bitch, she hissed, dropping all pretense. You have no idea what you've done. I stood up, placing a 20 on the table for my untouched water. I think I do. You can tell Ryan I'll be staying at Dad's house from now on, and he should expect divorce papers soon. As I walked away, my phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. Meeting wrapped up early. Coming home tonight. Miss you. I smiled grimly, typing my response. Don't bother. I know everything. Then I blocked his number, got into my car, and drove. Toward Dad's house, my house now, feeling stronger than I had in months. The battle was far from over, but for the first time, I was ready to fight. 3 days passed without a word from Ryan or Melissa. I'd moved most of my essential belongings to Dad's house, changed the locks, and met with both Ms. Phillips and a divorce attorney. The quiet before the storm, Sophia called it. On the 4th day, the storm arrived. I was sorting through Dad's old records in the study when the doorbell rang, followed by insistent knocking. Taking a deep breath, I went to answer it, peering through the peephole first. It wasn't Ryan or Melissa standing on the porch, but a man I vaguely recognized. Tall, with dark hair and glasses, wearing a button-down shirt and jeans. He shifted nervously from foot to foot. "Who is it?" I called through the door. "Jennifer? It's Daniel Hayes. We went to high school together. I need to talk to you. It's important." The name clicked into place. Daniel Hayes. We'd had AP chemistry together senior year. But why would he be showing up at my door after all these years? Cautiously, I opened the door, keeping the security chain in place. "Daniel, what are you doing here?" He glanced over, his shoulder, as if checking to see if he'd been followed. "Can I come in? This isn't a conversation we should have on your porch." Every instinct told me to shut the door, but something in his expression, a mix of anxiety and determination, made me hesitate. "How did you even know where to find me?" "I've been involved with Melissa," he admitted. "But that's part of what I need to talk to you about." "Please, Jennifer." Against my better judgment, I closed the door, unhooked the chain, and let him in. I led him to the living room, deliberately choosing a seat that gave me a clear path to both the front door and the kitchen where I'd left my phone. "You have 5 minutes," I said, crossing my arms. "Start talking." Daniel ran a hand through his hair, clearly uncomfortable. "I've been seeing Melissa for about 6 months. At first it was just casual, but then she started talking about money. How she was going to come into some soon, how we could take a trip to Europe, buy a condo. My suspicion must have shown on my face, because he quickly added, "I didn't know where this money was supposedly coming from. Not at first. But then, about a month ago, she got drunk and started talking about your dad, about his money, about how you didn't deserve it." "And why are you telling me this now?" I asked, my voice cold. He pulled out his phone. "Because last night, she sent me this." He showed me a text conversation. "Melissa, need your help with a situation. My sister-in-law is having a mental breakdown, making wild accusations. If you back up my story about her erratic behavior, there's $50K in it for you." "She wants me to lie about you," Daniel said, looking genuinely disturbed. "To say I've seen you acting unstable, paranoid. She said Ryan's getting other people to do the same." My blood ran cold. So that was their play. They couldn't fight the evidence I had, so they were going to try to discredit me instead. "Why should I believe you're not part of their scheme? This could be a trap." Daniel swiped to another message. Melissa again. "Ryan's arranged for Dr. Wallace to sign off on temporary conservatorship papers. Once we get control of the accounts, I'll transfer your cut. Just stick to the story we discussed." I'm not a perfect person, Jennifer, but I draw the line at this kind of manipulation. It's wrong. I studied his face, looking for signs of deception. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing," he said simply. "I just thought you should know what they're planning, and..." He hesitated. I recorded some of our conversations, times when she talked about their plans. I thought they might help you. He pulled out a USB drive and placed it on the coffee table between us. "It's all on here." I made no move to take it. "Why would you do this? You're risking whatever relationship you have with Melissa." Daniel laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Relationship? She's been using me from day one. I see that now. And honestly, I've always felt bad about how I treated you in high school. How you treated me. I frowned, trying to remember. Chemistry class, senior year. You helped me pass. Let me copy your labs when I was too hungover to do the work. I never thanked you properly. In fact, I think I took credit for some of your ideas in the final project. A vague memory surfaced, feeling hurt and used by a classmate I'd had a mild crush on. That was a long time ago. Still, I'm trying to be a better person these days. He stood up. Look, you don't have to trust me. But listen to the recordings, and be careful. They're more desperate than you realize. After Daniel left, I stared at the USB drive for a long time before finally plugging it into my laptop. What I heard confirmed my worst fears, and then some. Melissa, speaking candidly about their plans, their desperation, and most alarmingly, Ryan's meeting with Dr. Wallace. Wallace is totally on board, Melissa's voice said clearly on one recording. He'll testify that Jennifer's grief has triggered a psychotic break. Once Ryan has conservatorship, we can access everything. I called Sophia immediately. They're moving faster than we thought, I told her after explaining about Daniel's visit. I need to speak with Ms. Phillips right away. An hour later, I sat in Eleanor Phillips' office, playing the recordings for her. Her expression grew increasingly grim. This is deeply troubling, she said when the final recording ended. They're essentially planning to commit fraud and possibly unlawful imprisonment, depending on what type of treatment they might try to force on you. What can I do? I asked, fighting to keep my voice steady. Ms. Phillips leaned back in her chair, thinking. We need to move preemptively. File for a restraining order against both of them, alert the medical board about Dr. Wallace, and most importantly, make sure multiple people document your mental state as completely sound. I can help with that, Sophia said firmly. She'd insisted on coming with me to the meeting. And I'm staying with you until this is resolved. You shouldn't be alone right now. Ms. Phillips nodded approvingly. Good. I'd also suggest we bring in Howard and Patricia Campbell, Ryan's parents. They should know what their children are plotting. My stomach knotted at the thought. Ryan's parents had always been kind to me, and exposing their children's scheme would hurt them deeply. But Ms. Phillips was right. They needed to know. There's something else, I said slowly, an idea forming. Dad mentioned in his letter that Ryan's business might be in trouble. What if we look into that? Find out exactly what kind of financial pressure they're under. Ms. Phillips smiled, a determined glint in her eye. Now you're thinking strategically. I have a friend who specializes in forensic accounting. Let me make a call. As we left the lawyer's office, I felt a mix of emotions. Anger, betrayal, but also a growing resolve. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about standing up for myself, honoring Dad's faith in me, and taking control of my life in a way I never had before. That evening, as Sophia and I were making dinner at Dad's house, the doorbell rang again. I tensed, exchanging a glance with Sophia. I'll get it, she said, grabbing her phone. If it's Ryan or Melissa, I'll call 911. But it wasn't either of them. It was Daniel again, looking even more agitated than before. They know, he blurted as soon as I opened the door. Melissa figured out I warned you. She's furious. How? I asked, ushering him inside. I don't know. Maybe she saw us talking or checked my phone. But Ryan just called me, threatening me if I interfere again. Sophia crossed her arms, eyeing him suspiciously. How do we know this isn't just another part of their plan? Get you inside, gain our trust, then what? Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. Because of this. He pulled up his call history, showing a series of increasingly frantic calls from both Melissa and Ryan in the past hour. Then he played a voicemail. You backstabbing piece of shit. You think you can betray me? We know you went to her. You have no idea who you're messing with. Stay away from Jennifer, or I swear to God you'll regret it." Melissa's voice slurred but unmistakably threatening. "I think I'm in over my head here," Daniel said, his voice shaking slightly. "But I wanted to warn you. They're accelerating their plans. Ryan mentioned something about a family intervention tomorrow." I exchanged looks with Sophia. "An intervention? They're gathering people at their parents' house. People who'll say they're concerned about your mental health." It was happening exactly as Dad had warned. They were moving to take control, to paint me as unstable. But this time, I was a step ahead. "You should stay here tonight," I told Daniel. "It's not safe for you to be alone if they're this angry." Sophia raised an eyebrow but didn't contradict me. Later, after showing Daniel to the guest room, she pulled me aside. "Are you sure about this? We still don't know if we can fully trust him." "I don't think we have a choice," I admitted. "And right now, we need all the allies we can get." The next morning, I called Ms. Phillips with an update. She agreed that we needed to act immediately. "I've spoken with my investigator friend," she told me. "There's something you should know about Ryan's business. It's worse than we thought. He's not just failing, he's being investigated for fraud. Apparently, he's been misappropriating client funds for months." The pieces clicked into place. No wonder they were so desperate to get control of my inheritance. Ryan wasn't just in financial trouble, he was potentially facing criminal charges. "What's our next move?" I asked. "We go to the Campbell family gathering," Ms. Phillips said, firmly. "But on our terms, not theirs. I'll bring the documentation. You bring your witnesses. It's time to end this." That afternoon, I stood on the porch of the Campbell family lake house, flanked by Sophia, Daniel, and Ms. Phillips. My heart pounded, but my resolve was firm. Taking a deep breath, I rang the doorbell. Howard Campbell opened the door, his expression shifting from confusion to concern when he saw our group. "Jennifer? What's going on? We were just about to call you." "I know about the intervention, Howard," I said gently. "May we come in? There are some things you and Patricia need to hear." He hesitated, then stepped aside. In the living room, I found exactly what Daniel had warned me about. Ryan and Melissa, Dr. Wallace, and several family friends, all arranged in a circle of chairs like some twisted version of a surprise party. Ryan jumped to his feet. "Jen, what are you doing here so early? And why did you bring—" His voice trailed off as he recognized Ms. Phillips. "I believe Jennifer has something to share with everyone," Ms. Phillips said, her professional demeanor unwavering. All eyes turned to me. This was it, the moment Dad had prepared me for. "I know what you've been planning, Ryan," I said, my voice stronger than I expected. "You and Melissa both. The scheme to declare me mentally unfit, to gain control of my inheritance, to sell off Dad's properties." Ryan's face reddened. "That's ridiculous. This is exactly the kind of paranoid thinking we're concerned about." "Is it paranoia when I have proof?" I asked calmly, nodding to Ms. Phillips, who opened her briefcase and began distributing copies of the documents we'd gathered. Bank statements showing Ryan's company is not just failing, but under investigation for fraud. Recorded conversations of Melissa discussing your plans to have me declared incompetent. Witness statements from multiple sources. Patricia Campbell picked up one of the papers, her hand trembling slightly as she read. "Ryan, what is this? These transfers? Where did this money go?" Ryan's face had gone from red to ashen. "Mom, don't listen to her. Jennifer's been unstable since Bill died. She's making wild accusations because she doesn't want to share the inheritance." "Share?" I repeated incredulously. "Is that what you call having me committed and taking complete control of what my father left me?" Dr. Wallace cleared his throat, standing to leave. "I think I should go. This appears to be a family matter." "Stay right there," Ms. Phillips commanded. "The medical board will be very interested in your role in this attempted fraud, Doctor." Howard Campbell had been silently reading through the documents, his expression growing increasingly grim. He finally looked up, focusing first on Melissa, then on Ryan. "Explain this," he demanded, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Now." Melissa burst into tears, always her defense mechanism of choice. "Daddy, she's twisting everything. We're just trying to help her." "By recording her without consent? By planning to have her declared mentally unfit? By drafting paperwork to sell off William's properties before his daughter could inherit them?" Howard's voice rose with each question. "That's not helping, Melissa. That's criminal." Ryan tried a different approach. "Dad, you don't understand the pressure we've been under. The business has hit some rough patches." "Rough patches?" Patricia interjected, holding up financial statements. "Ryan, you've been stealing from your clients. How could you?" The room erupted into chaos. Accusations, denials, revelations. Through it all, I remained standing, watching as the carefully constructed facade of the Campbell family crumbled. Part of me felt sad, especially for Howard and Patricia, who had always been kind to me. But a stronger part felt vindicated, empowered. Finally, Howard raised his hand, silencing the room. "Enough." He turned to me, his expression grave but resolute. "Jennifer, I cannot begin to express how deeply sorry I am. What my children have attempted to do is unconscionable." "Dad!" Melissa protested, but fell silent at his withering look. "I raised you both better than this," Howard continued, addressing Ryan and Melissa. "Your mother and I have always emphasized honesty, integrity, hard work. Values you've clearly abandoned. I've never been more disappointed." Ryan's face hardened. "So you're taking her side? Just like that?" "This isn't about sides, Ryan. This is about right and wrong. And what you and your sister planned to do was very, very wrong." Howard turned back to me. "What do you want to do, Jennifer? Press charges?" The question hung in the air. Everyone was looking at me, waiting. I thought about Dad, about what he would say in this moment. "What I want," I said carefully, "is for Ryan and Melissa to stay completely out of my life from now on. I'll be filing for divorce, of course. And if there's any more interference with my inheritance or attempts to discredit me, then yes, I will press charges and pursue every legal remedy available to me." Ms. Phillips nodded approvingly. "I've prepared restraining orders for both Ryan and Melissa, and the evidence regarding Ryan's business irregularities has already been forwarded to the appropriate authorities." The shock on Ryan's face would have been comical under different circumstances. "You can't do this," he sputtered. "We're married. You can't just—" "I believe she just did," Sophia interjected, stepping closer to me in solidarity. As we prepared to leave, Patricia approached me, tears in her eyes. "Jennifer, I don't know what to say, except that I'm sorry. So very sorry." I squeezed her hand gently. "I know you are, Patricia. This isn't your fault. Will you be all right?" I looked around at my small but loyal group of supporters, Sophia, Daniel, Ms. Phillips, and felt a wave of certainty wash over me. "Yes," I said. "I think I will be." Walking out of the Campbell Lake house felt like breaking free from invisible chains I hadn't even realized were binding me. The sun was setting over the water, casting everything in a golden glow that seemed somehow symbolic. "You did it," Sophia whispered, linking her arm through mine. "Your dad would be so proud." I smiled, feeling tears prick at the corners of my eyes. Not tears of sadness this time, but of release, of triumph, of hope. "We're not done yet," I said, "but we've made a good start." That night, back at Dad's house, my house now truly, we celebrated with takeout and wine. Ms. Phillips outlined next steps for the divorce proceedings and securing the inheritance. Daniel shared more details about Melissa's schemes, filling in gaps in our understanding. Sophia made us laugh with outrageous suggestions for how I should spend my first million. As our impromptu celebration wound down and everyone prepared to leave, Daniel lingered behind. "I just wanted to say that I'm glad I could help," he said awkwardly. "And I'm sorry again for everything with Melissa." "You more than made up for it," I assured him. "I don't know if I could have done this without your evidence." He shook his head. "Yes, you could have. You're stronger than you think, Jennifer. You always were." After everyone had gone, I wandered through the quiet house, running my fingers along the spines of Dad's books, the frame of his favorite painting, the arm of his leather chair. For the first time since his death, I felt his presence not as a weight of grief, but as a comforting presence, a guiding hand. "I did it, Dad," I whispered to the empty room. "Just like you knew I could." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of legal meetings, paperwork, and decisions. Ms. Phillips guided me through the complex process of securing my inheritance while simultaneously pushing forward with the divorce. Sophia helped me sort through Dad's belongings, a process that proved both heartbreaking and healing. And to my surprise, Daniel became a steady presence, helping with practical matters and offering friendship with no apparent agenda. One afternoon, as I was sorting through Dad's financial records in preparation for a meeting with his investment advisor, I found a notebook I hadn't seen before. It was old, the leather cover worn soft with age. Inside, in Dad's precise handwriting, was what appeared to be a journal, not of daily events, but of dreams and plans. There were sketches of building designs, notes about sustainable materials, calculations about costs and timelines. And on the final pages, a detailed plan for the waterfront property that Ryan had tried to sell. Not just any house, but an eco-friendly community center dedicated to Mother's memory. The Margaret Morgan Center for Environmental Education. I read aloud, tracing the words with my finger. Mom had been a biology teacher, passionate about conservation. She died when I was in college, and Dad had never remarried. This wasn't just a retirement dream. It was a legacy project, something meaningful he'd planned to build. And now, it was my responsibility to see it through. I called Ms. Phillips immediately. "I need to know everything about the waterfront property Dad owned, and I want to set up a meeting with an architect." 2 months after the confrontation at the Campbell Lake House, I stood on that same waterfront property, watching as construction crews broke ground on the Margaret Morgan Center. Beside me stood Howard and Patricia Campbell, who had surprised me by offering to contribute financially to the project after learning of its purpose. "Bill always talked about doing something special with this land," Howard said, his voice thick with emotion. "He would be so pleased to see this happening. We wanted you to know that we don't blame you for cutting ties with Ryan and Melissa," Patricia added quietly. "Their actions were their own, and we've had to accept that our children made terrible choices." I squeezed her hand. "Thank you for saying that, and for being here today." Ryan's business had indeed collapsed amid the fraud investigation, and he'd left town rather than face the mounting legal troubles. Melissa had followed shortly after, supposedly heading to Florida to restart her life. Neither had contacted me directly since the restraining orders were issued, though I occasionally heard rumors through mutual acquaintances. As we watched the ceremonial first shovel of dirt being turned, Sophia nudged me gently. "Look who's here." Daniel was making his way toward us, dressed more formally than usual in a button-down shirt and dress pants. He'd been helpful in connecting me with his cousin who worked for an environmental nonprofit, creating a partnership that would help run educational programs at the center once it was complete. "Sorry I'm late," he said, slightly out of breath. "Traffic was awful." "You're just in time," I assured him. "They're about to unveil the design plans." As the architect began explaining the sustainable features of the building, I found myself reflecting on how much had changed in such a short time. 6 months ago, I'd been trapped in a marriage I didn't fully realize was failing. mourning my father, and nearly victimized by the people I should have been able to trust most. Now, I was standing on my own 2 feet, making decisions that honored both Dad's memory and my own values, surrounded by people who genuinely supported me. The journey wasn't over. There were still moments of grief, days when the betrayal felt fresh, challenges with managing the inheritance responsibly. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was living authentically, guided by Dad's wisdom but charting my own course. After the groundbreaking ceremony, we gathered at a nearby restaurant for a celebratory lunch. Glasses were raised, toasts were made to Dad's memory and to the future of the center. As conversations flowed around me, I slipped away to the restaurant's terrace, needing a moment alone. The lake stretched before me, sunlight dancing on its surface. I pulled Dad's letter from my purse. I still carried it with me everywhere, a talisman of sorts. Trust your instincts, sweetheart. Not everyone has your best interests at heart. Those words had saved me, had given me the courage to fight back when it would have been easier to doubt myself, to give in to Ryan and Melissa's manipulations. "Beautiful view," Daniel said, joining me at the railing. "You okay?" I nodded, tucking the letter away. "Just taking it all in. Sometimes it still doesn't feel real, everything that's happened." "You've accomplished a lot in a short time," he observed. "The center, the divorce settlement, reorganizing your father's business interests. It's impressive." "I've had help," I acknowledged. "Good people in my corner." We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching a sailboat glide across the water. "Jennifer," Daniel began, his voice taking on a more serious tone. "There's something I've been wanting to talk to you about." My guard instantly went up, a reflex I was working on but hadn't fully overcome. "What is it?" He must have noticed my tension because he quickly added, "Nothing bad, I promise. It's about the old Harrington building downtown. Your father owned it, right?" I relaxed slightly. "Yes, it's part of the commercial properties I inherited. Why?" "I've been looking for a new location for my design studio. The lease on my current space is up next month, and I thought—" He paused, seeming uncharacteristically nervous. "Well, I thought maybe we could work something out. Professionally, I mean." "You want to rent the Harrington building?" "Not the whole thing, just the ground floor. It has the perfect light, the right layout, and it's been sitting empty for a while." I considered this. The building had indeed been vacant for months, and commercial real estate in Riverdale wasn't exactly booming. We'd need to draw up a proper lease agreement, no friendly discounts or special terms. Daniel smiled, understanding my meaning. Immediately. "I wouldn't expect any. In fact, I insist on paying market rate." "Then I think we can arrange something. I'll have Ms. Phillips contact you with the details." As we rejoined the others, I felt a small but significant shift. Another step toward rebuilding my life on my own terms, making business decisions based on what made sense rather than emotional entanglements. The next morning, I met with Dad's former business partner, Frank Donovan, to discuss the future of Morgan Construction, the company Dad had built from the ground up. "The board is impressed with how you've handled everything," Frank said as we walked through the company headquarters. "Taking over as majority shareholder couldn't have been easy, especially with everything else going on." "I had a good teacher," I replied, thinking of all the times Dad had brought me to job sites as a child, explaining every aspect of the business with patience and enthusiasm. "That you did. Bill always said you had a better head for business than he did." I stopped walking, surprised. "He said that?" Frank nodded. "All the time. He was so proud of you, Jen. Said you were the best investment he ever made." The compliment warmed me from the inside out. I'm still learning. There's so much I don't know about running a construction company. But you're willing to learn, to ask questions, to listen to advice without letting others make decisions. For you. That's more than half the battle. Frank hesitated, then added, I hope you know that if Bill had any concerns about your ability to handle all this, he would have set things up differently. He trusted you completely. That trust had saved me in more ways than one. Not just the practical preparations Dad had made, the evidence gathered, the legal protections established, but the confidence he'd had in me, the belief that I could stand on my own. As I drove home from the meeting, I found myself taking a detour past the house I'd shared with Ryan. It looked different somehow, smaller, less significant. A for sale sign stood in the front yard, a visible symbol of that chapter of my life closing. I felt no urge to stop, no pang of nostalgia or regret. That house had never truly been mine, I realized. I'd decorated it according to Ryan's preferences, entertained his clients, lived by his schedule. It had been a beautiful cage, one I hadn't even recognized I was in until Dad's letter had given me the key to escape. Back at Dad's house, my house, I found Sophia waiting on the porch swing, 2 cups of coffee beside her. I used my key, she explained, handing me one of the cups. Hope that's okay. Always, I assured her, settling beside her on the swing. What brings you by? Just checking in. It's been a week since I've seen you with everything going on. How are you really doing? I considered the question thoughtfully. Honestly, I'm doing well, better than I expected. There are still moments. I trailed off, thinking of the nightmares I sometimes had, where I was trapped in a psychiatric facility while Ryan and Melissa spent my inheritance. But they're getting less frequent. Sophia nodded. That's good. And how are things with Daniel? What do you mean, things with Daniel? I asked, perhaps a bit too quickly. He's renting space in one of the buildings for his design studio. It's a business arrangement. She hummed skeptically. A business arrangement that involves him bringing you coffee 3 times a week and helping you set up the foundation for the environmental center? He's being friendly and helpful and interested. I sighed, nudging her with my elbow. It's not like that. I'm not ready for anything like that. Might never be after Ryan. Sophia's expression softened. I know, and I'm not pushing. Just observing that he seems like one of the good ones, unlike some people we could name. Maybe, I conceded. But right now, I'm focused on building a life that's truly mine. Figuring out who Jennifer Morgan is when she's not trying to be what someone else wants. Fair enough, Sophia said, clinking her coffee cup against mine. To Jennifer Morgan, independent woman, business owner, and all-around badass. I laughed, feeling a lightness that had once seemed impossible in the dark days after Dad's death and Ryan's betrayal. I don't know about the badass part. Are you kidding? You faced down your manipulative husband and his scheming sister, protected your inheritance, and turned their plans upside down. Total badass move. When Sophia left, I spent the evening going through more of Dad's papers, this time with a specific purpose. I was looking for anything related to Mom, to her environmental work, wanting to incorporate her vision into the center that would bear her name. In a file labeled simply Margaret, I found a treasure trove, articles she'd written for environmental journals, photographs of her leading student field trips, notes for the book she'd never gotten to write about sustainable education practices. Among these documents was an envelope addressed to me in Mom's handwriting. Inside was a letter dated just weeks before her unexpected death, a letter Dad had apparently kept all these years without telling me. My darling Jennifer, I'm writing this as you're about to graduate college and begin your adult life. I'm so proud of the woman you've become, intelligent, compassionate, and stronger than you know. Life will challenge you in ways you can't anticipate. There will be losses, disappointments, even betrayals. But remember this, you are a Morgan woman. We bend but do not break. Follow your heart, but trust your mind. Build a life that reflects your values, not someone else's expectations. And know that whatever path you choose, my love goes with you. Always. With all my heart, Mom tears streamed down my face as I read and reread the letter. It was as if both my parents had somehow known what challenges lay ahead for me, had both reached across time to offer guidance just when I needed it most. "I'm trying, Mom," I whispered. "I'm trying to be strong, to build that life you talked about." The next day, I made a decision that had been brewing for weeks. I called Ms. Phillips and asked her to draw up paperwork establishing the Morgan Family Foundation, a nonprofit that would not only oversee the environmental center but fund scholarships for students pursuing careers in environmental science. "I want to use a significant portion of my inheritance for this," I explained. "Dad built his wealth to secure our family's future, but I think he'd approve of sharing it this way." "I think he'd be delighted," Ms. Phillips agreed. "This is a wonderful tribute to both your parents, Jennifer." As summer turned to fall, the foundation took shape, the center's construction progressed, and my divorce from Ryan was finalized with minimal drama. He was too busy dealing with his legal troubles to put up much resistance. I settled into a new routine, dividing my time between overseeing Dad's business interests, developing the foundation, and slowly, cautiously, building a social life independent of my former marriage. Sophia introduced me to her wider circle of friends, and I reconnected with former colleagues from my accounting days. And yes, Daniel remained in the picture, first as a tenant in the Harrington building, then as a volunteer designing educational materials for the center, and gradually, as a friend I found myself looking forward to seeing. One crisp October evening, almost exactly a year after Dad's passing, I hosted a small gathering at my home, a private memorial of sorts. Sophia came, of course, along with Frank Donovan, Ms. Phillips, and a few of Dad's oldest friends. Daniel arrived last, carrying a small potted tree. "It's a sugar maple," he explained as I admired it. "I thought we could plant it at the center. They live for hundreds of years, so it would be like a living memorial." The thoughtfulness of the gesture touched me deeply. "That's perfect. Thank you." After dinner, as everyone shared stories about Dad, I found myself feeling not just the familiar ache of loss, but a profound sense of gratitude. Without Dad's foresight, his suspicions about Ryan, his careful planning, his letter of warning, I might have lost everything, including my sense of self. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Daniel helped me clean up, working alongside me in comfortable silence. "I've been meaning to ask you something," he said as we finished loading the dishwasher. "The foundation is hosting that fundraising gala next month for the center. Would you maybe want to go together? As, a date?" The question caught me off guard, though perhaps it shouldn't have. There had been moments over the past months, lingering glances, conversations that stretched late into the evening, a growing ease between us that felt nothing like my relationship with Ryan. "I'm sorry," he backtracked quickly, misinterpreting my silence. "Too soon. I understand completely." "No," I interrupted. "It's not that. Well, maybe partly that. It's just..." I searched for the right words. The last time I trusted someone that way, it didn't end well. Daniel nodded seriously. "I know, and I would never want to rush you or make you uncomfortable. But I also want you to know that I admire you, Jennifer. Your strength, your integrity, your kindness despite everything you've been through. And I'd like the chance to show you that not all relationships have to be about what someone can get from you." I studied his face, thinking about trust, about risk, about my parents' letters urging me to live authentically and open-heartedly, despite life's disappointments. "One step at a time," I suggested. His smile was warm, genuine. "One step at a time sounds perfect." That night, after everyone had gone, I sat in Dad's study, my study now, and wrote in the journal I'd started keeping after finding his notebook. I wrote about the year of tremendous loss and unexpected growth, about the lessons learned and the strength discovered. Dad's letter changed everything, I wrote. Not just because it warned me about Ryan and Melissa's plans, but because it reminded me to trust myself when everything around me seemed uncertain. That might be his greatest gift to me. Not the inheritance they tried to steal, but the confidence that I could protect it, that I could stand on my own. Outside, the wind rustled through autumn leaves, and somewhere in the distance, a clock chimed midnight. I closed my journal, feeling a sense of completion, of one chapter ending and another beginning. The battle for my father's legacy was over. The journey to build my own had just begun. Spring arrived in Riverdale with a burst of new beginnings. The Margaret Morgan Center was taking shape on the waterfront property, its innovative design already drawing attention from environmental groups across the state. The Morgan Family Foundation had funded its first round of scholarships, and I'd just finalized the restructuring of Dad's company with Frank Donovan's help. Life was falling into a new rhythm, purposeful, meaningful, and increasingly my own. Yet, beneath the surface of this carefully reconstructed existence, I still felt occasional tremors of the past. Which is why the email that appeared in my inbox on a sunny Tuesday morning sent such a jolt through me. From Melissa, Campbell Edgemail. Com. Subject, we need to talk. Jennifer, I know you probably don't want to hear from me. The restraining order expired last month, and I'm taking a chance writing to you. Ryan doesn't know I'm reaching out. I've been in therapy, trying to understand why I did what I did. I'm not asking for forgiveness, but there's something you should know. Something about your father that Ryan told me, but never put in writing. Please meet me at Oakwood Park tomorrow at 2. Come alone. Melissa. My finger hovered over the delete button. This had to be another manipulation, another attempt to get something from me. And yet, what if there was something about Dad I didn't know? Something important? I forwarded the email to Ms. Phillips and Sophia, adding, should I ignore this or hear her out? Then I tried to focus on work, but found my mind continually circling back to Melissa's cryptic message. Sophia called first. It's a trap, she said bluntly. She probably wants money, or to mess with your head. Ms. Phillips was more measured. The restraining order has indeed expired. Legally, she's allowed to contact you, but I'd advise extreme caution. If you do meet her, do so in public and have someone nearby, not with you, but close enough to intervene if needed. Daniel, when I mentioned it over lunch, had the most unexpected reaction. Go, he said simply. But wear a recording device. If she's trying to set you up somehow, you'll have evidence. And if she actually has information about your dad, you'll want to hear it. I weighed their advice all day, vacillating between dismissing Melissa's request entirely and burning with curiosity about what she might know. By evening, I'd made my decision. The next day, I arrived at Oakwood Park 15 minutes early, taking a seat on a bench near the fountain, visible from all angles, in a busy area with plenty of people around. Daniel sat in his car at the edge of the park, close enough to see me but not immediately obvious. In my purse was a small recording device he'd lent me. At precisely 2:00, Melissa appeared. She looked different, thinner, less polished, her designer clothes replaced by simple jeans and a sweater. She hesitated when she saw me, then approached slowly. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice lacking its usual confidence. "I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't," I replied honestly. "What do you want, Melissa?" She sat at the opposite end of the bench, maintaining distance between. "First, I want to say I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am. What Ryan and I tried to do was wrong." I remained silent, waiting. Apologies were cheap. She twisted her hands in her lap. "The thing is, Jen, Ryan's in trouble. Serious trouble. Beyond the business fraud, I mean. That's not my problem anymore. No, but..." She took a deep breath. The reason I wanted to talk about your dad is because Ryan told me something once about a confrontation they had a few weeks before your dad got sick. My attention sharpened. What kind of confrontation? Ryan came home furious that night. He said your dad had accused him of embezzling from one of their joint investment accounts, an account you didn't know about. This was news to me. Dad never mentioned any joint account with Ryan. That's because Ryan convinced him not to tell you. He said it would just upset you, that they would handle it between them. Melissa looked away. Ryan paid the money back, but your dad told him he was keeping evidence of what happened, said it was insurance. My mind raced. Why are you telling me this now? Because Ryan's desperate. The fraud investigation is closing in, and he's convinced your dad hid evidence somewhere that could make things worse for him. She hesitated. Been what, Melissa? He broke into your house last week while you were at the foundation fundraiser, looking for whatever your dad might have kept. A chill ran through me despite the warm spring day. He what? She nodded miserably. He didn't find anything. But he's not going to stop. He thinks your dad must have told you something, left you some kind of message about it. I thought of Dad's letter, which mentioned financial irregularities, but nothing specific about a joint account. If this is true, why would you warn me? You've always taken Ryan's side. Melissa's eyes glistened with tears. Because I'm scared of what he might do. He's not the same person anymore, Jen. He's desperate and angry and blames everyone but himself. She wiped at her eyes. And because maybe I'm trying to be better than I was. I studied her face, trying to determine if this was an elaborate act. I need to think about this. If there's any truth to what you're saying, I'll need to talk to Ms. Phillips. I understand. Just be careful, okay? I don't think Ryan would hurt you physically, but he's not thinking clearly right now. As she stood to leave, I felt compelled to ask, how are you really, Melissa? Where are you living now? A flicker of surprise crossed her face at the personal question. Tampa. I have a job at a marketing firm. It's not glamorous, but it's honest work. She gave a small, self-deprecating laugh. First honest job I've had in years, actually. After she walked away, Daniel joined me on the bench. Did you get all that? I asked. He nodded, looking troubled. Every word. Do you believe her? I don't know, I admitted. It could be another manipulation. But what if it's not? That evening, I met with Ms. Phillips in her office, playing her the recording of my conversation with Melissa. It's possible she's telling the truth, Ms. Phillips said when the recording ended. Your father did mention concerns about Ryan's financial activities to me, though not specifically about a joint account. It's one of the reasons he hired the private investigator. So what do I do? If Ryan's been in my house once, he could come back. First, we change all your locks and install a security system, today. Second, I'll look into this joint account angle, see if there's any evidence in your father's financial records. She tapped her pen thoughtfully against her desk. And third, we might want to consider setting a trap. What kind of trap? If Ryan is looking for something specific, perhaps we let him think you found it. Draw him out, on our terms, with police nearby. The idea was both frightening and oddly appealing. After months of moving forward with my life, here was a chance to finally close the chapter on Ryan completely. Let me think about it, I said. In the meantime, I'll go through Dad's papers again, see if there's anything I missed. That night, with new locks installed and a security system activated, I sat in Dad's study surrounded by boxes of his personal papers. Most I'd already been through after his death, but I'd been grieving then, less attentive to details that might now seem significant. Hours into my search, as midnight approached, I found something odd. A small key taped to the back of a framed photo of Mom and Dad. their wedding picture, which had always sat on his desk. It wasn't labeled and didn't look like a house or car key. Safety deposit box, perhaps? But I'd already emptied the one I knew about at Riverdale First National. I called Ms. Phillips first thing in the morning. I found a key hidden in Dad's study. I'm not sure what it's for, but it seems significant given what Melissa told me. "Bring it to my office," she said. "I might have some news for you as well." When I arrived, Ms. Phillips was waiting with a folder of documents. "I did some digging into your father's banking records. There was indeed a joint investment account with Ryan, opened about 5 years ago. It was closed 3 months before your father's diagnosis." So Melissa was telling the truth about that part. It appears so. The account held quite a substantial amount, nearly $500,000, and there were some unusual withdrawals that align with the timeline Melissa described. I showed her the key I'd found. "Any idea what this might be for?" She examined it carefully. "It's not for a safety deposit box at any of the major banks in Riverdale. Those have a distinctive... Look, this appears to be for a storage unit or locker of some kind. Dad never mentioned having a storage unit. No, but if he was gathering evidence against Ryan, he might have kept it somewhere separate, somewhere Ryan wouldn't think to look." We spent the next few hours calling storage facilities throughout Riverdale. On the 6th try, we got a hit, a small unit at secure self-storage on the outskirts of town, rented in Dad's name 2 months before his diagnosis. "I'd like to come with you," Ms. Phillips said as I prepared to leave. Whatever's in that unit could be legally significant. The storage facility was industrial and anonymous, a maze of identical metal doors. The manager led us to Unit 227, checked Dad's paperwork that Ms. Phillips had brought, and left us alone. My hand trembled slightly as I inserted the key into the lock. It turned smoothly, and the door rolled up to reveal a small, climate-controlled space containing a single metal filing cabinet and a cardboard box. "He certainly wasn't keeping family heirlooms here," Ms. Phillips observed, pulling on a pair of latex gloves she'd brought. "This looks deliberately organized." The filing cabinet contained meticulously labeled folders, financial statements, bank records, emails printed and organized chronologically. The earliest dated back 7 years, to when Ryan had first joined Dad's company as a project manager. "Your father was building a case," Ms. Phillips said as we went through the documents. "Not just about the joint account, but what looks like a pattern of financial mismanagement and possible fraud stretching back years." The cardboard box held even more damning evidence: a flash drive labeled RC Recordings, a small notebook with dates and amounts, and photographs of Ryan meeting with people later identified in Dad's notes as investors he'd defrauded. Why didn't he go to the authorities with this? I wondered aloud. Ms. Phillips's expression was somber. Based on these notes, he was planning to. But he wanted to give Ryan one chance to come clean to you first. He writes here about confronting Ryan about his promise to pay back what he'd taken. Your father was giving him time to do the right thing. And then he got sick, I said quietly. And everything changed. We carefully repacked everything, taking inventory and making copies of key documents before returning the originals to the unit. Despite the satisfaction of discovering what Dad had hidden, I felt a profound sadness. He'd been trying to protect me from the truth about Ryan until the very end. Back at home, I called Daniel to update him on what we'd found. This changes things, he said. Ryan's not just worried about the current fraud investigation. He's worried about all of it coming out. Ms. Phillips is talking to the prosecutor handling his case tomorrow. This evidence could make a significant difference. There was a pause on the line. How are you feeling about all this? I considered the question, trying to sort through the tangle of emotions. Sad, angry, but also relieved in a way. To have confirmation that Dad saw through Ryan before the end, that he was trying to protect me. Your father was an extraordinary man. Yes, I agreed softly. He was. After we hung up, I sat on the porch swing, watching darkness fall over the neighborhood. The past kept finding ways to pull me back, yet each time I emerged with more clarity, more certainty about who I was and what mattered to me. The next morning, I had just finished breakfast when my phone rang. Howard Campbell. Jennifer, I hope I'm not calling too early. Not at all, Howard. Is everything all right? There was a heavy sigh on the other end. No, I'm afraid not. The FBI came to our house this morning. They've arrested Ryan. Despite everything, I felt a pang of sympathy for Howard and Patricia. I'm so sorry. Don't be. It's been a long time coming. His voice was weary but resolute. The agent mentioned new evidence came to light. I think I can guess where it came from. My father kept records, I said simply. Bill always was thorough. Howard paused. There's something else, Jennifer. They searched Ryan's apartment and found plans of your house, security system information. They believe he was planning to break in again. My conversation with Melissa suddenly took on new weight. Melissa warned me he might try something like that. Melissa? Howard sounded surprised. You've spoken with her? She reached out to me a few days ago, told me about a confrontation between Dad and Ryan, about Ryan breaking into my house, once already. I had no idea. He was quiet for a moment. Patricia and I have tried to keep our distance from both of them. Focus on helping with your environmental center instead. It's been easier that way. I understand, Howard, and I appreciate your call. Of course. Despite everything, we still care about you, Jennifer. You're the daughter we wish we'd had. His words touched me deeply. Thank you. That means a lot. As news of Ryan's arrest spread, I received calls from Sophia, Ms. Phillips, and finally, Melissa. I heard from my parents, she said, about Ryan. Yes, the FBI found evidence he was planning to break into my house again. I'm sorry, Jen. I should have been more specific about the danger. Something in her voice caught my attention. Did you know what he was planning? Not exactly, but I knew he was desperate enough to do something drastic. She hesitated. There's something else I didn't tell you when we met. Something about me. What is it? I'm the one who tipped off the authorities about Ryan's fraud initially. 6 months ago, after I moved to Florida. I couldn't keep carrying the guilt of what we'd tried to do to you. The revelation stunned me. You turned him in? I'd like to say it was purely moral awakening, but it was partly self-preservation. I was afraid he might try to implicate me if he got caught. Her voice softened. But yes, I did finally do the right thing. Too late to undo the harm we caused, I know. I wasn't sure how to process this new information. Thank you for telling me. I don't expect us to ever be friends again, Jen, but I am truly sorry for everything. After we hung up, I sat for a long time thinking about forgiveness, about the complicated nature of healing and moving forward. Melissa's actions had been inexcusable, yet her recent choices suggested genuine remorse. Not enough to rebuild trust, but perhaps enough to let go of some of the anger I'd been carrying. That evening, the Morgan Family Foundation was hosting a community meeting about the Environmental Center's educational programs. Despite the emotional turmoil of the day, I was determined to keep my commitment to speak at the event. The community center was packed with local residents, environmental activists, and potential donors. As I took the podium, I saw familiar faces in the crowd, Sophia in the front row, Ms. Phillips toward the back, Daniel operating the slideshow, Howard and Patricia sitting quietly to one side. Thank you all for coming tonight, I began. The Margaret Morgan Center represents not just a building or a program, but a vision of what our community can be when we work together toward a sustainable future. As I spoke about Mom's environmental legacy and the center's goals, I felt a subtle shift within myself. Here, focused on creation rather than the destruction Ryan had wrought, I was most fully myself. After the presentation, during the reception, Daniel approached with 2 glasses of champagne. "That was impressive," he said, handing me one. "You had the entire room captivated. It's easy to be passionate about something that matters." "I've been thinking," he said, his tone turning more serious. "With Ryan's arrest, that chapter of your life is finally closing. How do you feel about that?" I considered the question. Relieved, mostly. Like I can fully move forward now without looking over my shoulder. "And how would you feel about moving forward with someone by your side?" My pulse quickened. "Daniel, I know we agreed to take things slowly," he continued. "And I respect that completely. But these past months, working together on the center, getting to know you, I've never met anyone like you, Jennifer. Your strength, your compassion, the way you've turned your pain into purpose." I looked at him, really looked at him. This man who had become such an important part of my new life. Unlike Ryan, whose charm had always felt like a performance, Daniel's sincerity was palpable, his support consistent without being controlling. "I care about you too," I admitted, "but I'm still healing, still finding my footing." "I understand. And I'm not asking for promises or commitments, just openness to possibilities." I thought of Mom's letter, her advice to build a life reflecting my values rather than others' expectations. Daniel had never pressured me, never tried to direct my choices. Instead, he'd supported my independence, encouraged my growth. "I think I can do openness to possibilities," I said, offering him a small smile. His answering smile was warm, patient. "That's all I'm asking for." Later that night, after everyone had gone, I walked through the quiet house, the house that had been Dad's and was now truly mine in every sense. So much had changed in a year. I had changed, growing stronger, more confident, more discerning about who and what deserved a place in my life. In Dad's study, I opened the drawer where I kept his letter, reading it again as I had so many times before. "Trust your instincts, sweetheart. Not everyone has your best interests at heart." Those words had been a warning, but also a vote of confidence in my ability to distinguish true allies from those who would use me. Dad had seen through Ryan, had tried to protect me while still respecting my agency. His final gift hadn't been the inheritance that Ryan and Melissa coveted, but the tools and confidence to protect myself. The next morning, I received a call from Ms. Phillips. "I've just heard from the prosecutor. With your father's evidence, Ryan is facing additional charges beyond the existing fraud case. They're also investigating the break-in at your house and the planned second attempt." What does that mean for his sentence? If convicted on all counts, he's looking at a minimum of 15 years. His attorney will likely push for a plea deal, but even so, he'll serve significant time. The news should have felt like victory, but instead, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Relief that Ryan would face consequences, sadness for the waste of potential, closure on a painful chapter. "There's something else," Ms. Phillips continued. "The prosecutor mentioned Melissa has been cooperating with their investigation for months, providing key information about Ryan's activities. She may receive immunity in exchange for her testimony." So Melissa had been telling the truth about that as well. "Do you think she deserves immunity?" I asked, curious about Ms. Phillips' perspective. "Legally speaking, her cooperation is valuable to building the case against Ryan, who appears to be the primary architect of the fraud. Morally speaking." She paused. "That's not for me to judge, or perhaps not for any of us to judge." After the call ended, I walked to the construction site of the Margaret Morgan Center. It was coming along beautifully, the sustainable design taking shape against the backdrop of the lake. Workers nodded greetings as I made my way to what would eventually be the main classroom, where floor-to-ceiling windows would offer views of the water and natural habitats we were creating. Standing there, I felt a profound sense of purpose. This center would be Mom's legacy, and Dad's too. their values of education, conservation, and community continuing long after them. And it would be part of my legacy as well, a statement about what I believed in and what I wanted to contribute to the world. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. "Lunch? I've got news." An hour later, we sat at our favorite cafe, Sophia practically bouncing with excitement. "I got the grant," she exclaimed as soon as our drinks arrived. "The full amount to develop the curriculum for the center's school programs." "That's fantastic." I reached across the table to squeeze her hand. "I never doubted you would. It means I can quit the teaching job I'm lukewarm about and focus entirely on developing environmental education programs. Your mom would have loved this." "She absolutely would have," I agreed, raising my glass in a toast to new beginnings. As we ate, I filled Sophia in on the latest developments with Ryan's case and my conversation with Melissa. "So she really did turn on him," Sophia mused. "Didn't see that coming." "Me neither. It's strange to think she might actually be trying to make amends in her own way." Sophia studied me over her salad. "Could you ever forgive her? Either of them?" I considered the question seriously. Forgiveness isn't about excusing what they did. It's about not letting the anger and hurt continue to affect me. In that sense, I think I'm getting there with Melissa, with Ryan. I shook my head. That's harder. The betrayal went deeper. And what about moving forward? Daniel looked quite attentive at the community meeting last night. I couldn't help the small smile that formed. We're exploring possibilities. I knew it, Sophia practically crowed. He's perfect for you, you know. Supportive without being smothering, successful but not materialistic. And he looks at you like, you hung the moon. It's early days, I cautioned. And I'm still figuring out who I am on my own. Those things aren't mutually exclusive, Jen. You can keep discovering yourself while sharing your journey with someone who appreciates the real you. Her words stayed with me as I drove to my next appointment, a meeting with the architect designing the interior spaces of the center. The real me. For so long, I'd molded myself to fit Ryan's expectations, suppressing parts of myself that didn't align with his vision of the perfect wife. Now, I was reclaiming those parts, rediscovering passions and strengths that had been dormant. As I pulled into the parking lot, I spotted Daniel waiting outside the architect's office, early as usual. He waved when he saw my car, his smile warm and genuine. "Ready to finalize those interior plans?" he called as I approached. I nodded, returning his smile. "Ready for anything, actually." And for the first time in a very long time, I truly meant it. The grand opening of the Margaret Morgan Environmental Center was set for the first Saturday in June, almost 18 months after Dad's passing. As the date approached, my days blurred into a whirlwind of final inspections, media interviews, and coordinating with the dozens of people involved in bringing the center to life. "You need to breathe," Sophia reminded me as we toured the completed main building 3 days before the opening. "Everything is coming together beautifully." I paused in the sunlit atrium, taking in the space that had once existed only in Dad's notebook sketches. The exposed timber beams, recycled glass accents, and living green wall filled me with quiet pride. "Mom would have loved this," I said softly, running my hand along a railing made from reclaimed dockwood. "Sometimes I can almost feel her here." "She is here," Sophia insisted, gesturing to the building around us. "In every sustainable choice, every educational component. This place embodies everything she valued." We continued our walkthrough, checking off items on our extensive list. The classroom spaces were equipped and ready. The interactive exhibits on local ecosystems were installed and functioning. The outdoor trail system was complete, with native plantings establishing themselves along the carefully designed paths. As we exited onto the back deck overlooking the lake, I spotted Daniel speaking with the landscaping crew, gesturing toward the rain garden they were putting finishing touches on. He caught sight of us and waved, excusing himself to join us. "The eastern trail markers are installed," he reported, "and the solar-powered lighting along the accessible paths is operational. We're right on schedule." The casual "we" didn't escape my notice. Though Daniel had started as a volunteer, helping with design elements for the center's educational materials, his role had grown organically over time. Now, he was as invested in the center's success as I was, having spent countless hours ensuring every detail aligned with our vision. "Have you seen the final version of the donor wall?" I asked him. "Just finished installing it an hour ago. Want to take a look?" He led us to the main entrance hall, where an artistic arrangement of reclaimed wood, metal, and glass now displayed the names of those who had contributed to making the center possible. At the center, a simple plaque read, "The Margaret Morgan Environmental Center, dedicated to education, conservation, and community, in loving memory of Margaret and William Morgan." "It's perfect," I whispered, throat tight with emotion. Daniel squeezed my hand gently. "They would be proud, Jen. Not just of this place, but of you." That evening, as we walked the perimeter of the property, making sure everything was secure before leaving, Daniel seemed unusually thoughtful. "Something on your mind?" I asked as we reached the parking lot. He hesitated, then nodded. "Actually, yes. I've been offered a position with the National Park Service, design and educational outreach for their visitor centers." My heart sank. "That sounds like an amazing opportunity. Where is it?" "That's the thing. It would be based here in the regional office, but require travel to different parks. I'd be gone for weeks at a time sometimes." "Oh." I processed this, trying to untangle my feelings. "When would you start?" "That's up to me. They're flexible. On the timeline." He turned to face me fully. "The thing is, Jen, I don't want to make any decisions without talking to you first. We've been taking things slow, and I respect that. But this job would change the rhythm we've established." Over the past 6 months, our relationship had indeed developed into something meaningful. Dinner dates that stretched into long conversations. Weekends hiking or working on the center. Quiet evenings simply enjoying each other's company. We hadn't labeled it, hadn't made formal commitments, but the connection was undeniable. "You should take it," I said firmly. "It's a fantastic opportunity that aligns perfectly with your values and skills." "And us?" he asked cautiously. I thought about how different this felt from my relationship with Ryan. The mutual respect. The absence of pressure or manipulation. The way Daniel consistently supported my independence rather than trying to control me. "We'll figure it out," I said, reaching for his hand. "I'm not afraid of a little distance if the connection is right." His smile was equal parts relief and affection. "I was hoping you'd say that. Just promise me one thing," I added as we walked to our cars. "Be here for the opening on Saturday. It wouldn't feel right without you." Wild horses couldn't keep me away. The next 2 days passed in a blur of final preparations. Local media toured the facility. Catering arrangements were confirmed. Staff ran through their roles for the opening ceremony. Through it all, I maintained an outward calm that belied my inner emotional tumult. This center represented so much: Dad's final gift to me, Mom's environmental legacy, my own emergence from the darkness that had threatened to engulf me after Dad's death and Ryan's betrayal. The night before the opening, I returned to the center alone after everyone else had left. I wanted a quiet moment to absorb it all before tomorrow's public celebration. Walking through the silent building, I found myself in the Heritage Room, a space dedicated to the history of environmental conservation in our region, including a special exhibit on Mom's work with local schools. Her photograph smiled down at me from the wall, Mom in her element, surrounded by students on a field trip, her face alive with passion for the natural world she was teaching them about. Beside it hung a picture of Dad at the groundbreaking of one of his most successful sustainable building projects, looking proud and solid. "I did it," I whispered to their images. "With a lot of help, but I did it." The sound of the door opening startled me. I turned to see Ms. Phillips entering the room, elegant as always in her tailored suit despite the late hour. "I thought I might find you here," she said warmly. "Security mentioned your car was still in the parking lot." "Just having a quiet moment before tomorrow's chaos," I explained. "What brings you here so late?" She joined me in front of the photographs. "I wanted to drop off something for you. A gift of sorts, though it was always yours." She handed me a legal-sized envelope. "The final paperwork transferring all assets from your father's estate into your name. Everything is complete now." I accepted the envelope, surprised by the wave of emotion that washed over me. "Thank you for everything. I couldn't have navigated any of this without you." "Your father was more than a client to me," she said, quietly. "He was a friend. Helping you honor his legacy has been my privilege." She studied the photographs on the wall. "They would both be immensely proud of what you've accomplished here, Jennifer." After she left, I continued my solitary tour of the center, ending on the observation deck overlooking the lake. The moon cast a silver path across the water, and a light breeze rustled through the trees. In that peaceful moment, I felt a profound sense of completion, of rightness. The journey had been painful, filled with loss and betrayal, but it had led to this, a place of beauty and purpose that would serve the community for generations to come. And along the way, I had discovered strengths I never knew I possessed. Opening day dawned bright and clear, as if the weather itself was celebrating with us. I arrived early to find the parking lot already filling with staff, volunteers, and the first eager visitors. Sophia met me at the entrance, clipboard in hand. "Everything's on schedule," she reported. "The mayor and county commissioners are in the VIP room. The school choir is ready. Howard and Patricia just arrived and are helping with the welcome table. And Daniel is checking the sound system for the speeches." I took a deep breath, smoothing down my dress, a deep green that had been Mom's favorite color. "Let's do this." The opening ceremony exceeded all expectations. Over 300 people filled the outdoor amphitheater as I took the podium to deliver my speech. Faces I recognized from every part of my life looked back at me. The Morgan construction employees who had volunteered their expertise. Dads, old friends, my former colleagues, Howard and Patricia Campbell, who had become surrogate parents of sorts, and front and center, Sophia and Daniel. "Welcome to the Margaret Morgan Environmental Center," I began, my voice steady and clear. This day represents the culmination of a dream shared by many, but especially by my parents, Margaret and William Morgan. My mother dedicated her life to environmental education, believing that teaching young people to understand and love the natural world was the surest path to protecting it. My father built his business on principles of sustainable development long before it was fashionable. This center honors their legacy by combining those passions, education, and sustainable building practices, in a space where our community can learn, explore, and connect with the environment around us. As I continued my speech, I felt a sense of peaceful certainty that had been missing from my life for so long. This was exactly where I was meant to be, doing exactly what I was meant to do. After the ribbon cutting, I was swept into a whirlwind of conversations, congratulations, and media interviews. It was mid-afternoon before I had a moment to myself, slipping away to the quiet of the staff office for a brief respite. I had just sunk into a chair when a knock came at the door. Howard Campbell entered, looking distinguished as always, but with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Magnificent achievement, Jennifer," he said, taking the seat I offered. "The center is everything. You promised and more. Thank you, Howard. Having your and Patricia's support has meant so much to me." He nodded, his expression turning serious. "There's something I need to tell you. I received a letter from Ryan yesterday." My stomach tightened. From prison? What did he want? To express remorse, supposedly. He asked me to tell you he's sorry for everything. Howard's tone made it clear what he thought of this belated apology. I debated whether to mention it at all, especially today of all days. But I believe in transparency. I appreciated Howard's honesty. Over the months since Ryan's arrest, his parents had become important figures in my life, supporting the center financially and emotionally, never making excuses for their son's actions. "Does he want something?" I asked, having learned to be wary of Ryan's apologies. "He mentioned hoping you might consider writing a letter to the parole board when he becomes eligible. Years from now?" Howard added quickly. "Patricia and I told him not to expect anything from you, that you owe him nothing." I nodded, processing this. "Thank you for telling me. I'll think about it. Not today, but someday." "That's more than he deserves," Howard said, standing. "Now, let's rejoin the celebration. This is your day, Jennifer. Don't let Ryan's shadow fall across it." He was right, of course. I pushed thoughts of Ryan aside and immersed myself in the joy of the day, watching as visitors explored the center, participated in guided nature walks, and engaged with the interactive exhibits. Children's laughter rang out from the discovery area, and the classroom spaces hosted mini workshops throughout the afternoon. As the official events wound down and the last visitors departed, the core team gathered on the observation deck for a private toast. Sophia raised her glass first. "To Jennifer Morgan, whose vision and determination made this day possible. And to Margaret and William Morgan, whose legacy lives on in this amazing place. To the center," added Frank Donovan, who had been instrumental in coordinating the construction. "May it educate and inspire for generations to come." Daniel was the last to speak. "To new beginnings," he said simply, his eyes meeting mine over the rim of his glass. As the sun began to set, painting the lake in hues of gold and pink, I was struck by how far I'd come from that devastating day when Dad had called me to his study to share his terminal diagnosis. The pain of losing him would never completely fade, but it had been transformed into something meaningful, something that would benefit others. Later, after the last goodbyes had been said, and only Daniel and I remained, we walked the grounds in comfortable silence, taking in the quiet beauty of the center at dusk. "I have something for you," he said as we reached the memorial garden where the sugar maple he had given me now stood, already growing strong. He pulled a small box from his pocket. "It's not what you might think," he added quickly. "Open it." Inside was a beautiful compass, vintage in appearance but clearly refurbished. On the back was an inscription, "Find your true north." It was my grandfather's, Daniel explained. He was a park ranger for 40 years, used this to explore some of America's most beautiful wilderness areas. "Daniel, it's wonderful, but are you sure you want to give me something so meaningful?" He nodded. The compass guided him to the places that mattered most. "I thought it was fitting for you, considering the journey you've been on." I closed my hand around the compass, deeply moved by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "Thank you. Not just for this, but for everything. Your support, your patience, your belief in me and in this place. You did all the hard parts, Jen. I just had the good sense to recognize an amazing woman when I met one." Under the deepening twilight sky, with the center standing as testament to all we'd accomplished, I reached up and kissed him. Not our first kiss, but perhaps the most meaningful one. It felt like sealing a promise, not just to each other, but to the values we shared. "When do you start the new job?" I asked as we finally broke apart. 3 weeks from Monday. My first assignment is a visitor center redesign at Shenandoah. I've never been there. His smile was slow and full of promise. "Would you like to come with me? Just for a long weekend. I'll show you some of my favorite trails." The old Jennifer might have hesitated, might have worried about what others would think or whether it was too soon. But the woman I'd become recognized the invitation for what it was. Not a demand or an attempt to control, but a genuine desire to share something meaningful. "I'd love that," I said simply. 2 days after the opening, as the center settled into its regular operations, I received an unexpected email from Melissa. From Melissa, Campbell Gmail. Subject: "Congratulations, Jennifer. I saw the article about the Environmental Center opening in the Riverdale Gazette online. It looks extraordinary. Your parents would be so proud of what you've created. I wanted to say congratulations. What you've built from the pain Ryan and I caused is remarkable. I know words can never undo what we did, but I hope you know my regret is genuine. The prosecutor mentioned you didn't oppose my immunity deal. Thank you for that. I'm trying to make the most of this second chance. Take care. Melissa P.S. I've started volunteering at an environmental education program for kids here in Tampa. Your mother's work, as described on the center's website, was the inspiration. I read the email twice, unsure how to feel. Part of me still harbored anger toward Melissa for her role in the scheme to steal my inheritance. Another part recognized the apparent sincerity of her efforts to change. After careful consideration, I decided to respond briefly. Melissa, thank you for your email and your kind words about the center. It represents a great deal of hard work by many dedicated people. I'm glad to hear you're volunteering with environmental education. Whatever your motivation, the children you work with will benefit. I wish you well in your new path. Jennifer. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was acknowledgement. Recognition that people can change, that redemption is possible. The Jennifer who had once tried so hard to please everyone, to keep the peace at any cost, might have offered empty absolution. The woman I'd become understood that true healing doesn't require pretending the wound never existed. As summer progressed, the center thrived. Educational programs filled to capacity. Research partnerships were established with local universities. The foundation funded its second round of environmental science scholarships. And I found a new rhythm to my life, running the foundation, serving on the center's board, and gradually re-engaging with the accounting work I'd always enjoyed. Daniel's new job took him away periodically, but our connection deepened despite the distance, perhaps even because of it. We learned to value our time together while respecting each other's independence, a healthier balance than I'd ever known with Ryan. In August, I received a letter from Dr. Martinez, Dad's oncologist, who had taken a special interest in the center. Dear Jennifer, I visited the Margaret Morgan Environmental Center last week with my grandchildren and was deeply impressed. What you have created is not just a beautiful facility, but a living testament to your parents' values. As a physician who witnesses the impact of grief every day, I wanted to tell you how inspired I am by the way you have channeled your loss into something so meaningful. Your father spoke often about you during his treatment, always with immense pride. He would be even prouder of the strength you've shown in the face of both his passing and the difficulties that followed. Medicine teaches us that healing is rarely linear and never complete. We carry our scars, but we also carry the wisdom they've taught us. You have clearly learned from your experiences and grown stronger for them. The center stands as proof that from great pain can come great purpose. With admiration, Dr. Elena Martinez. The letter brought tears to my eyes, not the devastating grief of earlier days, but a gentler emotion, a recognition of how far I'd come. I pinned it to the bulletin, board in my home office, a reminder that even our darkest times can lead to unexpected light. In September, Daniel returned from a 3-week assignment designing educational displays for several Western national parks. The evening of his return, we walked along the river trail near my house, catching up on everything that had happened during his absence. The foundation received another major donation, I told him as we paused on a footbridge overlooking the water. Anonymous, but substantial enough to fund the expanded scholarship program for the next 5 years. That's fantastic, he said. Any guesses who it might be? I shook my head. Ms. Phillips handles the paperwork. She says the donor specifically requested anonymity. Well, whoever it is, they obviously believe in what you're doing. As we continued walking, Daniel updated me on his projects, his enthusiasm infectious as he described the innovative ways the Park Service was trying to engage visitors in conservation efforts. Watching him, I was struck by how different he was from Ryan, his passion genuine rather than calculated, his ambition focused on making a difference rather than acquiring status or wealth. I've been thinking, he said as we neared the end of the trail. My lease is up next month, and with all the traveling I'm doing for work, it seems silly to maintain an apartment I'm hardly ever in. That makes sense, I agreed, though I felt a twinge of apprehension about where this might be leading. He must have sensed my concern because he quickly added, I'm not suggesting moving in together. I know that's not where we are yet, but I am considering buying a small place closer to the regional office, something that would be easier to maintain with my travel schedule. The relief I felt was immediately followed by a touch of guilt. Daniel had never pressured me, had always respected my need for space and independence. Yet some part of me still reflexively tensed at anything that might hint at deeper commitment. I think that's a smart idea, I said honestly. The commute from your current place to the office is pretty long. He nodded, seeming relieved by my response. I've been looking at a couple of options. Nothing decided yet. He hesitated, then added, but I wanted you to know. Your opinion matters to me. Those simple words, your opinion matters to me, highlighted yet another difference between Daniel and Ryan. Ryan had always made unilateral decisions, presenting them as fait accompli, while Daniel consistently sought my input, genuinely valuing my perspective. I appreciate that, I said softly. And for what it's worth, I think you should find a place that works for your life right now, not based on potential future scenarios. We have time to figure all that out. His smile was warm, understanding. Exactly what I was thinking. As October arrived, bringing brilliant fall colors to Riverdale, I received an unexpected phone call from Patricia Campbell. Jennifer, dear, do you have a moment? Of course, Patricia. Is everything all right? She sighed heavily. Howard and I are planning to visit Ryan next week. It will be our first time seeing him since the sentencing. She paused. He's asked about you again. Whether we think you might ever forgive him. I sat down, unprepared for the rush of emotions the mention of Ryan still evoked. What did you tell him? The truth. That forgiveness is earned, not demanded, and that his actions caused real harm that can't be undone with mere words. Her voice softened. But I also told him that you are thriving, that you've built something beautiful from the ashes of his betrayal. I hope that was all right. It was perfect, I assured her. And true. There's one more thing, Patricia continued. Howard and I have decided to sell the lake house. It holds too many difficult memories now. But before we listed, we wanted to offer you first refusal. I know it's where. The confrontation happened, so you might not want it, but it's also a beautiful property that would complement the environmental center's mission. The offer caught me off guard. The Campbell Lake House was indeed stunning. Situated on the opposite shore from the center, with extensive waterfront acreage that included several important wetland areas. Can I think about it? I asked. It's a generous offer, but I'd need to consider it carefully. Of course, dear. Take all the time you need. The property isn't going anywhere. After hanging up, I sat for a long time, considering the strange full-circle nature of the offer. The lake house where I'd confronted Ryan and Melissa, where their scheme had finally unraveled, could now become an extension of the center that had risen from the ashes of that betrayal. There was a poetic justice to it, a sense of reclamation. I called Daniel to get his perspective, knowing he'd understand the complex emotions involved. "It would be an incredible addition to the center's property," he said after I explained. "The wetlands alone are ecologically significant, but I get why you might hesitate, given the history." "I keep thinking about what Dad would say," I admitted. "He was always practical about business opportunities, but also deeply sentimental about certain places." "What does your gut tell you?" I considered the question. "That turning something painful into something purposeful is kind of what I've been doing all along. Maybe the lake house is just one more opportunity to do that." "Then I think you have your answer," he said softly. The next day, I called Patricia back and arranged to tour the property with her. As we walked the grounds, she shared stories of happier times there. Family gatherings before Ryan and Melissa had chosen their destructive paths. Howard teaching the neighborhood children to fish off the dock. Holiday celebrations with extended family. "I'd like to purchase it," I decided as we stood on the deck overlooking the lake, the center visible on the distant shore. "Not for myself to live in, but for the foundation. We could use it for research, educational retreats, maybe even artist residencies focused on environmental themes." Patricia's eyes filled with tears. "I can't think of a better future for this place. Howard will be so pleased." As we finalized the details, I felt another piece of the puzzle of my life clicking into place. The woman I had become would no longer avoid difficult places or memories. Instead, I would transform them, finding purpose in pain and meaning in loss. Just as Dad's letter had ultimately transformed a devastating betrayal into the path toward my true self. Winter descended on Riverdale with unusual severity that year. Heavy snowfall blanketed the environmental center and the surrounding landscape, transforming it into a pristine wonderland that attracted photographers and winter hiking enthusiasts. I found myself appreciating the seasonal shift, the quiet that settled over the property, the stark beauty of bare trees against snow, the way wildlife tracks told stories across the frozen ground. The renovation of the Campbell Lake House was progressing well, despite weather delays. We had decided to convert it into the Margaret Morgan Research Institute, a space where environmental scientists, educators, and artists could collaborate on projects aligned with the center's mission. Howard and Patricia had been deeply moved when I'd shared the plans, especially the dedication plaque that would acknowledge their contribution while making no mention of Ryan or Melissa. "You've managed to take something that held such painful memories for all of us and give it new life," Howard had said, his voice thick with emotion. "That seems to be your special gift, Jennifer." His words had stayed with me, a reminder that the path I'd chosen, transformation rather than destruction, purpose rather than bitterness, was the right one, however difficult it sometimes proved. On a particularly cold January morning, I arrived at the center to find Frank Donovan waiting in the lobby, stamping snow from his boots and looking uncharacteristically serious. "Frank, I wasn't expecting you today," I said, surprised to see Dad's former business partner. "Sorry to drop in unannounced," he replied, "but there's something we need to discuss and I thought it best to do it in person." We settled in my office, where the large windows overlooked the frozen lake. Frank declined coffee, getting straight to the point with the directness I'd always appreciated. "I've received an acquisition offer for Morgan Construction," he said. "A significant one, from Westfield Developers." The name immediately set off alarm bells. Westfield was known for aggressive expansion and limited commitment to the sustainable building practices Dad had pioneered. "They want to buy the company?" I asked, trying to process this unexpected news. Frank nodded. "They're specifically interested in our commercial division and client list. The offer is substantial, well above market value." I leaned back in my chair, thinking of Dad's legacy. Morgan Construction had been his life's work, built from the ground up based on principles he believed in deeply. As the majority shareholder following his death, the decision ultimately fell to me, though I valued Frank's input immensely. "What do you think?" I asked him. Frank sighed, running a hand through his silvering hair. "Financially, it's an incredible offer. But," he hesitated, "your father built this company to prove that commercial construction could be both profitable and environmentally responsible. Westfield doesn't share that philosophy. They'd likely dismantle our sustainability initiatives once the contracts were signed." I nodded, having suspected as much. "Then the answer is no. Dad didn't build Morgan Construction just to see it turned into another profit-at-any-cost operation." Relief washed over Frank's face. "That's what I hoped you'd say. Bill would be proud." He paused, then added, "But there's something else we should consider. If Westfield is this interested, others might be too. We should think about what we want the company's future to look like, proactively rather than reactively." We spent the next hour discussing possibilities, bringing in younger partners committed to Dad's vision, establishing a formal succession plan, even restructuring the company as a benefit corporation to legally protect its environmental commitments. By the time Frank left, we had the outline of a strategy that would honor Dad's legacy while ensuring the company's continued evolution. As I watched him drive away, I reflected on how different this decision had been from the ones that had preoccupied me immediately after Dad's death. Then I had been focused on survival, protecting what was mine from those who sought to take it. Now I was thinking about stewardship, how best to nurture and grow what Dad had entrusted to me, not just for my benefit, but for the broader community. That evening, I called Daniel, who was in Olympic National Park for a 2-week project. "You turned down how much money?" he asked, impressed rather than critical after I explained the Westfield offer. "It wasn't really about the amount," I said, curled up on the window seat where I could watch snow falling outside. "It was about what Dad would have wanted, what I want too." "The Jennifer I met a year and a half ago might have struggled more with that decision," he observed. "You've changed." "Have I?" "In the best ways. You're more confident in your own judgment, less worried about what others might think, more willing to take stands based on your values." His assessment warmed me, partly because it came from someone who had known me during those darker days after Dad's death, when I had been so unsure of myself, so vulnerable to the manipulation of others. "I think losing Dad forced me to grow, up in ways I hadn't before," I admitted. "And then everything with Ryan and Melissa? It was either break or become stronger." "You definitely chose the latter," Daniel said softly. "How did Frank take your decision?" "With relief, actually. He loved working with Dad because they shared the same values. The idea of selling to a company that would dismantle all they built together. He couldn't stomach it, even with the financial incentive." Our conversation shifted to Daniel's work at Olympic, the old-growth forests he was helping to interpret for visitors, the sustainable design principles being incorporated into the new visitor center. As always, his passion for his work was evident in every word. "When are you back?" I asked as our call wound down. "Next Tuesday, barring weather delays, just in time for the foundation board meeting. And the Morgan Construction Strategics planning session the day after," I added. "Busy week." "Too busy for dinner Thursday night?" "I have something I'd like to discuss with you." Something in his tone caught my attention. "Everything okay?" "More than okay," he assured me. "Just a potential opportunity I want your perspective on." After we hung up, I found myself contemplating the easy rhythm we'd established, supporting each other's work and goals while maintaining our individual paths, sharing thoughts and feelings without demands or expectations. It was so different from my marriage to Ryan, which had been characterized by his subtle but persistent attempts to control and direct my life. With Daniel, I felt seen and respected in ways I never had with Ryan. We had grown closer gradually, building trust through consistent actions rather than grand gestures or promises. I hadn't been looking for a relationship when he'd entered my life, quite the opposite. Yet here we were, navigating something meaningful and authentic together. The following week brought a flurry of activity. The foundation board unanimously approved funding for an expanded scholarship program targeting students from underserved communities interested in environmental careers. The strategic planning session for Morgan Construction resulted in a clear path forward, including bringing 2 younger partners into leadership roles and establishing a formal apprenticeship program for sustainable building practices. By Thursday evening, I was mentally exhausted but looking forward to dinner with Daniel. I'd chosen a cozy restaurant in the oldest part of Riverdale, a converted mill building with stone walls and warm lighting that created an intimate atmosphere despite the February chill outside. Daniel was waiting when I arrived, standing to greet me with a warm embrace. "You look beautiful," he said, helping me with my coat. "I feel like I've been running nonstop all week," I admitted as we settled at our table. "But good running, productive. Running. I heard the strategic planning session went well. Beyond expectations. We're positioning the company for the next decade, focusing on what Dad always valued: quality, sustainability, and community impact. Frank's been incredible throughout the process." Our conversation flowed easily through dinner, covering the week's events and Daniel's observations from his time in Olympic. It wasn't until dessert arrived that he brought up the opportunity he'd mentioned on the phone. "I've been offered a position with the International Conservation Alliance," he said, a hint of excitement in his voice. "Developing educational programs for protected areas in several countries." "Daniel, that's amazing," I exclaimed, genuinely thrilled for him. "It sounds perfect for your skills and interests." He nodded, a mix of excitement and something else, hesitation, in his expression. "It would involve significant international travel, 3 to 4 months abroad each year, at least initially." I absorbed this, understanding his hesitation. Our relationship had already adapted to his domestic travel schedule, but international assignments would create greater distance, longer separations. "When would you start?" I asked. "That's the thing," he said, reaching for my hand across the table. "I've told them I need time to consider, because while professionally this is an incredible opportunity, personally..." He paused, his eyes holding mine. "Personally, my life has become intertwined with yours in ways I never expected but deeply value. Any decision I make affects us both now." The sincerity in his voice touched me profoundly. This was yet another way Daniel differed from Ryan. His awareness that his choices impacted me, his desire to consider my feelings before making a decision, not as a form of control, but as a gesture of respect and care. "I think you should take it," I said firmly. "It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that aligns perfectly with everything you care about." "And us?" he asked, echoing our conversation from months earlier about his National Park Service position. I squeezed his hand. "We'll figure it out. Good relationships adapt and grow. They don't hold people back from their purpose." Relief and affection washed over his face. "That's what I hoped you'd say." He hesitated, then added, "There's something else. The position is based in Washington, D.C. I'd need to relocate from Riverdale." This news hit differently, not because of the distance which modern technology could bridge, but because it represented a more profound shift in our daily lives. No more impromptu dinners, no casual drop-ins at each other's places, no shared Saturday mornings at the farmer's market. "When?" I asked simply. "Not for 6 months. They want me to start with a training period in D.C. Then the first international assignment would be early next year." I nodded, processing this. 6 months was both a long time and no time at all. "We'll make it work," I said, finding that I truly believed it. "The foundation has projects in D.C. I could visit regularly, and you'd come back to Riverdale when you're not traveling." Daniel studied my face. "You're really okay with this?" I'm more than okay with it. I'm proud of you. This is important work, Daniel. Work that matters. His smile was tinged with wonder. Do you know how rare you are, Jennifer Morgan? Most people would be asking me to choose the relationship or the career opportunity. You're encouraging me to embrace both. Maybe because I understand now that real love doesn't confine people. It gives them wings. The words surprised me as they left my mouth, a wisdom I hadn't known I possessed until that moment. After dinner, as we walked through the gently falling snow to our cars, Daniel stopped suddenly, turning to face me. "Move in with me," he said. "For these 6 months before DC, let's share a home, build something together before the distance comes." The old Jennifer might have hesitated, might have worried about rushing things or what others would think. But the woman I'd become recognized the rightness of his suggestion, not as a demand or a trap, but as an opportunity to deepen our connection before navigating the challenges ahead. "Yes," I said simply, "but my house, not yours. It has more space and it's closer to the center." His surprised laugh echoed in the quiet street. "I just asked you to move in together and you're negotiating terms?" "Practical considerations," I replied with a smile. Dad always said never to let emotion override good sense in important decisions. "Your house it is," he agreed, pulling me close. "As long as we're together, the location doesn't matter." As we sealed the decision with a kiss, snow swirling around us like something from a movie, I felt a deep sense of peace. This choice, like turning down the Westfield offer, like transforming the Campbell Lake house, was another step in building a life that honored my values rather than others' expectations. Spring arrived early that year, breathing new life into Riverdale after the harsh winter. The Margaret Morgan Environmental Center buzzed with activity as school groups returned for field trips, research projects resumed, and planning began for summer programs. The Research Institute at the former Campbell Lake House was nearing completion, with scientists and educators already submitting proposals for its inaugural residency program. Living with Daniel these past 2 months had been surprisingly seamless. We'd found an easy rhythm together, our different work schedules providing both togetherness and independence. His books now shared shelf space with mine in Dad's study. Now, our shared home office. His photographs of national parks hung alongside family pictures in the living room. The house that had once been Dad's, then mine alone, now felt like ours in the best possible way. On a particularly beautiful April morning, as we shared coffee on the back porch, Daniel mentioned an upcoming trip to the prosecutor's office. "They want my statement about the recordings I made of Melissa and the evidence I provided," he explained. "Apparently, there's some procedural thing they need to finalize even though Ryan's case is closed." I nodded, having received a similar request. Ms. Phillips mentioned it might be related to his upcoming parole hearing. "Already? I thought he wouldn't be eligible for years." "It's just preliminary paperwork. Bureaucracy moves slowly, so they start the process well in advance." I hesitated, then added, "Howard asked if I would consider writing a character statement for the hearing." Daniel looked surprised. "Will you?" I'd been mulling this question for weeks. "I've decided to submit a factual account of what happened. No embellishment, no vindictiveness, just the truth. Let the parole board make their own determination based on facts rather than emotion." "That seems fair," Daniel observed. "More than fair, actually, given what he tried to do to you." I sipped my coffee, contemplating the journey that had brought me to this perspective. Carrying anger toward Ryan doesn't serve me anymore. It doesn't change what happened, and it doesn't affect my life now. Writing that statement feels like closing the final chapter on that part of my story. Daniel reached across the table, taking my hand. "You continue to amaze me, Jennifer Morgan. Your capacity for growth, for moving forward without bitterness, it's extraordinary." Later that day, as I worked on the statement for Ryan's parole hearing, I found myself reflecting on everything that had transpired since Dad's diagnosis nearly 2 years ago. The devastating grief of his loss, the shock of discovering Ryan, and Melissa's betrayal. The struggle to protect what was rightfully mine, the gradual rebuilding of my life on my own terms. I had changed in ways both subtle and profound. The people-pleasing, conflict-avoiding Jennifer who had tried so hard to accommodate Ryan's demands and Melissa's manipulation had been replaced by a woman who knew her own mind, who made decisions based on her values rather than others' expectations, who recognized manipulation for what it was and refused to engage with it. Dad's letter had been the catalyst for that transformation. Trust your instincts, sweetheart. Not everyone has your best interests at heart. Those words had saved me in more ways than one, not just from Ryan and Melissa's scheme, but from my own tendency to doubt myself, to defer to others' judgment, to seek approval at the expense of authenticity. My phone chimed with a text from Sophia. "Lunch tomorrow. Big news to share." I smiled, typing back a quick confirmation. Whatever Sophia's news, it was bound to be delivered with her characteristic enthusiasm. Our friendship had deepened through the crisis with Ryan and Melissa, becoming one of the anchors in my reconstructed life. The next day, over salads at our favorite cafe, Sophia could barely contain her excitement. The environmental education curriculum we developed for the center has been selected as a model program by the National Science Foundation, she announced, practically bouncing in her seat. They want to adapt it for schools nationwide. Sophia, that's incredible. I reached across the table to squeeze her hand. Your work is going to impact thousands of students. Our work, she corrected. The curriculum is based on your mother's teaching philosophy and the resources at the center you built. It's a team achievement. Her generosity touched me. Mom would be over the moon about this. Environmental education was her passion long before it was mainstream. Which is why the foundation should expand its teacher training program, Sophia suggested, already thinking ahead. If schools across the country are going to implement this curriculum, we need more educators prepared to teach it effectively. We spent the rest of lunch brainstorming possibilities, our excitement building with each idea. By the time we finished, we had the outline of a proposal for the foundation board, a national teacher training institute that would bring educators to the Center for Intensive Workshops on Environmental Education. As I drove back to the center afterward, I was struck by how naturally these professional conversations now flowed, how confident I felt in my vision and decision-making. The woman who had once deferred to Ryan's judgment on even minor matters now led a foundation, guided strategic decisions for her father's company, and helped shape educational initiatives with national impact. Dad had seen this capability in me all along, I realized. His careful estate planning hadn't just been about protecting his assets from potential threats like Ryan. It had been about entrusting me with his legacy, because he believed I was capable of carrying it forward, of building upon it in meaningful ways. At the center, I found Daniel in the exhibit hall, working with a team on a new interactive display about watershed protection. He looked up as I approached, his face lighting with a smile that still made my heart skip. "How was lunch with Sophia?" he asked as we stepped away from the group. I shared her news about the National Science Foundation recognition, watching his genuine pleasure at our friend's success. "That's fantastic," he said, "and perfectly timed. I just heard from the International Conservation Alliance. They're particularly interested in educational programming as part of my role. Sophia's curriculum could be a valuable resource." The synchronicity felt meaningful, another piece clicking into place in the mosaic of our interconnected lives and work. "When do you meet with them next?" "Next week in DC. It's a planning session for the first project in Costa Rica." He hesitated, then added, "I was hoping you might come with me. Not for the meetings, obviously, but afterward. We could look at neighborhoods, get a feel for where I might live when the move happens." The invitation touched me deeply. Not because it was grand or romantic, but because it was practical, inclusive, a clear statement that he saw our futures as intertwined even with the coming changes and distances. "I'd love that," I said, meaning it. "I have a foundation meeting Monday morning, but I could fly to DC that afternoon." As we finalized plans, Ms. Phillips arrived for our scheduled meeting about the Research Institute's legal structure. Watching Daniel return to his work with the exhibit team, I was struck by a sense of fullness, of rightness that had been missing from my life for so long. This, I realized, was what healing looked like. Not the absence of past pain, but the presence of current purpose. Not forgetting what had happened, but not being defined by it either. Not isolation for self-protection, but careful, intentional connection with those who had proven worthy of trust. The meeting with Ms. Phillips focused on final details for the Research Institute's opening next month. We had structured it as a separate entity under the Foundation umbrella, with its own advisory board that included leading environmental scientists, educators, and community representatives. Howard and Patricia Campbell had agreed to serve on this board, their expertise in finance and education proving valuable. The Campbell name will appear only on the advisory board listing as requested, Ms. Phillips confirmed, reviewing the documentation. The building itself will be known solely as the Margaret Morgan Research Institute. "Perfect," I affirmed. "Howard and Patricia have been incredibly supportive, but we all agree it's best to maintain distance from the family name given. Everything that happened." Ms. Phillips nodded understanding. "Speaking of which, I received confirmation that Ryan's initial parole hearing is scheduled for next spring. Your statement has been filed with the prosecutor's office. Good. I'm ready to put that chapter behind me completely." Her expression turned thoughtful. "You know, Jennifer, I've represented many clients in estate matters over the years. I've seen inheritances tear families apart, bring out the worst in people. But I've rarely seen someone handle such a difficult situation with the grace and wisdom you've shown." The compliment warmed me. "I had good guidance. Dad's letter, your counsel, support from friends like Sophia and Daniel. True, but you were the one who had to navigate it all," she pointed out. "Many people in your situation would have become bitter, vengeful, or perpetually distrustful. Instead, you've built something beautiful and meaningful. William would be immensely proud." As we concluded our meeting and Ms. Phillips departed, I found myself drawn to the center's heritage room, where photographs of both my parents were displayed alongside information about their environmental and sustainable building work. Looking at their images, I felt a deep connection that transcended loss. "I hope you're proud," I whispered to their smiling faces. "I'm trying to honor what you built, to carry it forward in ways that matter." That evening, as Daniel and I prepared dinner together in what was now our shared kitchen, I shared Ms. Phillips's words. "She's right, you know," he said, pausing and chopping vegetables. "What you've accomplished in less than 2 years is remarkable by any standard, but especially considering the circumstances. I stirred the pasta sauce considering this. I couldn't have done it alone. No one accomplishes anything meaningful alone," he agreed. "But that doesn't diminish your role. You were the catalyst, the visionary, the one who transformed tragedy into purpose." "Speaking of transformations," I said, changing the subject slightly, "the Research Institute is almost ready. We should schedule that dinner for Howard and Patricia soon. Give them a private tour before the public opening." Daniel nodded. "They've been incredible through all this. It can't be easy for them, reconciling their love for their son with the recognition of what he did. They've chosen to focus on supporting positive change, rather than defending actions they know were wrong," I observed. "That takes courage and integrity." As we sat down to dinner, our conversation shifted to the upcoming DC trip and Daniel's first international assignment in Costa Rica later in the year. We discussed practical matters, his housing in DC, how often we could manage visits, how we'd navigate the distance. "Technology helps," he noted. "Video calls, shared calendars, All that, but it will still be an adjustment. A worthwhile one, I reminded him. This opportunity aligns perfectly with your values and skills. We'll make it work. His expression softened. You know, when Melissa first blackmailed me into helping set you up, I never imagined we'd end up here. That the worst thing I've ever been involved in would lead indirectly to the best relationship of my life. The mention of that difficult beginning no longer stirred anxiety or doubt. Time and consistent actions had proven Daniel's remorse genuine, his character trustworthy. Life takes unexpected turns, I agreed. Sometimes painful ones lead to places we'd never otherwise have found. The next month passed in a whirlwind of activity. Daniel and I traveled to Washington, D.C., where he had productive meetings with the International Conservation Alliance, while I explored potential neighborhoods for his upcoming move. We found a small but charming apartment in a diverse neighborhood, known for its community gardens and proximity to public transportation. A perfect base for his new role. Back in Riverdale, preparations for the Research Institute's opening consumed much of my attention. The transformation of the Campbell Lake House was complete, its grand spaces now housing laboratory facilities, collaborative workspaces, and comfortable quarters for visiting researchers. The property's extensive grounds had been enhanced with demonstration gardens, native plant restoration areas, and carefully designed outdoor classroom spaces. The week before the official opening, I hosted a private dinner and tour for Howard and Patricia, along with Ms. Phillips, Sophia, and Daniel. As we walked through the renovated spaces, Howard grew emotional. "This is extraordinary, Jennifer," he said, his voice thick. "To see this place, which holds such difficult memories for all of us, transformed into something so positive, so forward-looking. It's more than I could have hoped for." Patricia squeezed his hand, her own eyes glistening. "The good this institute will do for generations to come. It's a fitting legacy for your parents and a powerful statement about the kind of person you are." The evening took on a bittersweet quality. Celebration of what had been accomplished mingled with acknowledgement of the painful journey that had led here. Yet there was no sense of dwelling in that pain, only of having moved through it towards something meaningful and lasting. As our guests departed, Daniel and I lingered on the Institute's deck overlooking the lake, the environmental center visible on the distant shore. The symmetry felt significant. Two buildings facing each other across the water, both born from Dad's legacy, both dedicated to the values he and Mom had championed throughout their lives. "Full circle," Daniel observed, echoing my thoughts. As he often did. "From confrontation to creation." "It feels right," I agreed. "Like this is exactly what was meant to happen, though I never could have imagined it 2 years ago." He wrapped an arm around my shoulders, pulling me close against the evening chill. "What's next for Jennifer Morgan? You've established the center, launched the Research Institute, restructured your father's company. Any new mountains to climb?" I laughed softly. "Nothing so dramatic. Just continuing the work, growing what we've built, making sure it remains meaningful and relevant." I paused, then added more seriously, "And figuring out this new chapter for us. Supporting your work with the Alliance while maintaining what we've built together here." "About that," Daniel said, turning to face me fully. "There's something I've been wanting to ask you." My heart quickened at his tone. "What is it?" He took both my hands in his. "These past months living together have been the happiest of my life. Even with the travel ahead, the distance, the complexity, I know with absolute certainty that you're the person I want to build a life with." "Daniel, let me finish," he said gently. "I'm not asking for marriage, not yet anyway. We both know you're still healing from what happened with Ryan, still finding your footing in this new life you've created. But I am asking for a promise that when I'm in Costa Rica or Kenya or wherever this work takes me, you'll be my home base, my true north. And that when the time is right for both of us, We'll take the next step, whatever that looks like. Tears pricked at my eyes, not from sadness, but from the profound rightness of his words. This man who had entered my life at its darkest moment, who had grown alongside me through healing and rebuilding, who supported my independence even as he cherished our connection, he understood exactly what I needed. Yes, I said simply. That's a promise I can make wholeheartedly. His smile in the moonlight reflected the joy I felt, quiet but deep, built on a foundation of mutual respect and genuine care rather than the shaky ground of manipulation or control that had characterized my relationship with Ryan. As we walked back to the car, hand in hand, I thought about Dad's letter once more, the warning that had saved me from Ryan and Melissa's scheme, but also the implicit faith that I would find my way through whatever challenges arose. Trust your instincts, sweetheart. Not everyone has your best interests at heart. The first part had helped me recognize those who sought to harm me. But the deeper lesson had been learning to recognize those who truly did have my best interests at heart. Sophia with her unwavering friendship, Ms. Phillips with her steady guidance, Howard and Patricia with their painful but principled stand against their own children's actions, and Daniel with his consistent support and respect. More importantly, I had learned to have my own best interests at heart, to make choices based on my values rather than others' expectations, to build boundaries where needed, to create a life that honored both what I had lost and what I hoped to build. The official opening of the Margaret Morgan Research Institute took place on a perfect May morning. Community members, environmental advocates, educators, and government officials gathered to celebrate the newest addition to what was becoming known as the Morgan Environmental Campus, the center and institute working in tandem to advance research, education, and conservation. As I stood at the podium to deliver my remarks, I saw faces that represented every chapter of my journey. Sophia beaming with pride in the front row, Frank Donovan standing tall beside longtime Morgan construction employees, Howard and Patricia Campbell sitting quietly to one side, Ms. Phillips watching with her characteristic calm assurance, and Daniel, whose steady presence had become my anchor. 2 years ago, I began, when my father left me his estate, I had no idea the journey it would set me on. A journey not just of protecting what was mine, but of discovering what truly mattered. What was worth building, worth fighting for, worth dedicating my life to advancing. I gestured to the building behind me, then to the center visible across the lake. These institutions represent more than buildings or programs. They represent a vision of what's possible when we choose creation over destruction, collaboration over competition, forward momentum over dwelling in past wounds. As I continued my speech, outlining the Institute's mission and the research already scheduled for its inaugural year, I felt a profound sense of completion. Not in the sense that the work was finished, but that a significant cycle had reached its natural conclusion. The battle for my father's legacy was over. The work of building my own had truly begun. Later, as guests mingled on the Institute's grounds, Sophia linked her arm through mine. Your parents would be bursting with pride. Right now, she said, not just at what you've built, but at who you've become. I smiled, squeezing her arm in return. I think they knew all along who I could be. Dad's letter wasn't just about warning me of danger. It was about reminding me to trust myself. Well, your instincts seem pretty solid these days, she observed. In business, in relationships, in creating meaningful change. Looking around at what we had accomplished, the thriving center, the new institute, the strengthened foundation, the restructured company, I felt a quiet confidence that had once seemed unattainable. Not arrogance or certainty that I had all the answers, but faith in my ability to navigate whatever challenges arose, to learn from mistakes, to grow through difficulty. Daniel approached, champagne glasses in hand. To new beginnings, he said, offering me one. And to the lessons that brought us here, I added, including Sophia in our toast. As the sun began to set over the lake, casting golden light across the water, I found myself drawn to a quiet spot away from the crowd. From this vantage point, I could see both the center and the institute, connected by the shimmering water between them. 2 years ago, I had stood in Dad's study, devastated by his terminal diagnosis, unable to imagine life without his steady presence. I could never have envisioned the journey that lay ahead, the betrayal by those I trusted, the battle to protect what was rightfully mine, the gradual rebuilding of my life on new terms. Dad's letter had changed everything, not just by warning me about Ryan and Melissa's scheme, but by reminding me of my own strength, my own wisdom, my own capacity to discern truth from manipulation. In saving my inheritance, I had ultimately found something far more valuable: my authentic self, my true purpose, my ability to transform pain into meaningful action. The path hadn't been easy. There had been moments of doubt, of fear, of grief so deep it seemed bottomless. But through it all, I had kept moving forward, guided by Dad's faith in me and gradually, increasingly, by my own inner compass. Now, as twilight settled over Riverdale and stars began to appear in the darkening sky, I felt a deep peace. Not because all questions were answered or all challenges resolved, but because I knew I had the strength and wisdom to face whatever came. Next, Daniel joined me in my quiet moment, slipping his arm around my waist without breaking the silence. Together, we watched as lights came on in both buildings across the lake, beacons in the gathering darkness. "Ready to head home?" he asked softly, after a while. I nodded, taking one last look at what we had built, what I had fought for, protected, and transformed. "Yes," I said simply. "I'm ready." And as we walked away, hand in hand under the star-filled sky, I knew with complete certainty that Dad had been right all along. I could trust my instincts. I could discern those who truly had my best interests at heart. I could build something meaningful from even the most painful experiences. In the end, that certainty, that hard-won self-trust, was the most valuable inheritance of all. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.